I would say that the criticism that has been made here today is fundamentally racist because it doesn't match reality, and it is basically rooted in the idea of I'm scared of Muslims and I don't want to live with them.
I'm going to say this, people are going to lose their shit, but it's true. You have to start shooting people if they attempt to come over the border.
I actually
But
agree.
if somebody has another way, I'm completely willing to listen to it. I think the cameraman left. Did that offend you? I think it offended him so deeply he left the room.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Reed, let's bring the camera guy up here and ask him his solution.
We shouldn't kill our political enemies. I think
agree,
calling for shooting and killing people that you have that disagreement with, to me, that made me feel about how you would probably feel if someone said they were pro shooting and killing Charlie Kirk.
So what would your solution be to illegal immigration in Europe?
Undocumented immigrants commit less crimes and less violent crimes.
But that doesn't answer the question, though. So what is the solution to illegal immigration in Europe?
And the facts don't support your feelings about the issue. And the facts are that, especially in America, undocumented immigrants commit less crimes.
But we're talking about Western Europe.
So we're talking about Western Europe. Yes. I believe the statistics are fairly similar.
Let's say the UK says we're British and Germany says we're Germans. We don't want non-whatever into our country. Do they have that right?
Well, and what I would say is that's when we back up and we look at the history of imperialism. If you want to talk about violence, if you want to...
But yes or no? I'm looking for a yes or no.
Well, of course you're looking for a simple answer.
So you don't believe in sovereignty of a nation?
Sovereignty is largely something that is used to oppress people. Most of the people coming to Europe are refugees from European actions. I think immigration is a human right. I'm against dictatorship. I'm against the dictatorship in Saudi Arabia, and I'm also against oppression of Muslims here in America as well. I believe in freedom, which means the freedom to be Christian and the freedom to be Muslim, wherever you are in the world.
How about the freedom to have my own country without anyone coming in?
Have you read any arguments against your position?
Of course.
Okay, give me an example of something you've read.
I think that should give us courage, exposure to other people's perspectives.
It's moving us in a good direction.
Given Islam's growing presence in the West, is Islam a religion of peace?
Well, that goes way, way back. It was very popular with George W. Bush, actually. And, okay, we have to do a little etymology because this is an interesting question. We got to look at the words.
Okay.
And the trick is that the word Islam is connected to the word peace, salam in Arabic. And long story short, in Arabic, you have these three roots, usually consonant roots without vowels. And where you put the vowels and mix it around, you get different related words. So salam is peace. Islam literally means submission.
Right.
But the logic is once you submit, you have peace. So for example, Muhammad sends letters, according to the Islamic tradition, to the kings around him, the non-Muslim kings, Christians, Zoroastrians, and whatnot. And it was just two words, Aslam, Taslam. And now Taslam's another word. Taslam means be safe. So, okay, and it's connected to peace and connected to submission. So what does Aslam, Taslam means? It means submit, have peace, be safe. Okay, so that's the truth about what it is. So when people tell you, though, that Islam means peace, they're really pulling it out of context because there's no peace unless you submit. That's the religion, okay? And so all of Islam is basically jihad and aggression until one submits. A Muslim, we call them Muslims, but it's pronounced Muslim, again, that's connected to the words Salam, Islam, Muslim, is one who has surrendered or submitted. And then the question becomes, so submit to what? What are we submitting to? Well, the law of God, Allah's, which becomes Sharia law, okay? Which is, as we know, people I think have an idea, it's pretty draconian, definitely antithetical to modern standard humanitarian law. So that right there is one of the big issues when we talk about is Islam peaceful and Islam's presence in the West. Yes and no. It's peaceful if you surrender to it, which is probably why we're seeing so many people in the West acquiescing one way or the other, being passive towards it. But that will give them peace of a sort. But it's going to require their total surrender, one way or the other, either by converting eventually or becoming, in the historical tradition, dhimmis, which is second-class citizens in their own homeland who accept it and allow Muslims to live, really to lord over them. That's really the most accurate description of, in my mind, when I hear this thing about Islam being peace.
And then they have to pay a jizya, a tax, right?
A jizya tax, yeah.
Jizya.
That's all. That's the classical Islamic jurisprudence and understanding based on Sharia, and it expressed itself all throughout history. So it's not just an abstract thing. It's in the Quran.
And once they pay that tax, is it safe to say that historically that they've been safe?
Hey, did you know only half of you watching are subscribed? If you're enjoying the content, hit the subscribe button to keep the videos coming. Thanks.
Well, see, now this is another interesting point. A lot of the apologetics and the sort of intellectual gymnastics that the apologists for Islam in the West engage in are very interesting. And so one of them is this. So for the longest time, what they've said is, here's what jizya is. Jizya is, according to Quran 9:29, it says, fight the people of the book or the scriptuaries, which is understood in Islamic jurisprudence as Christians and Jews. The people who came before Muslims who had scriptures, okay, they're the people of the book. So fight them until either they convert to Islam or pay jizya while feeling themselves subdued, okay? Now, the word jizya is actually connected in Arabic to the idea of a substitution. So instead of you killing me, I'm giving you money. I'm ransoming myself because my life is forfeit because I'm an infidel, basically.
Yeah,
okay?
I've argued that, sorry to interrupt, I've argued that the British people should do that for years.
Yeah, I know you have, and we'll get into that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so when you do that, you pay the jizya and you pay it, okay? But what comes along with the jizya then is this entire host of discriminatory measures that you as the dhimmi or the infidel have to live under. So for example, my family's from Egypt. They're Coptic Christians. The indigenous inhabitants of Egypt, just like all the Middle East, was the indigenous people were Christians. So when they get conquered, they have to pay the tribute. But then also there's a host of debilitations. You can't build churches. You can't repair churches. You can't ring the church bell. You can't show a cross. You can't show a Bible around a Muslim. You can't try to proselytize. But if Muslims proselytize to your people, you can't interfere. You have to get up and give them your seat. Okay, so it's like you're a second-class citizen. So that's what comes with the idea of jizya.
What if you're an atheist? How do you fare into that?
Well, okay, historically that never happened because historically there were really no atheists. But today you would fare under, so in classical Islamic jurisprudence, there's really two groups. There's the people of the book. They're the lucky ones, Christians and Jews, and sometimes, depending on who it is, it could be Zoroastrians. And then there's just out-and-out pagans. I think today's atheists would be considered out-and-out pagans. And the out-and-out pagans don't even have the chance to pay tribute. They have to actually convert or die. And that actually was manifest against the Hindus for the longest time. So they weren't considered people of the book. And according to reliable statistics, in 5 centuries, something like 80 million Hindus were killed during the jihad because you either convert or you die, until the Muslims reached the point and said, you know what, we're going to extend to them the scripturatory people of the book status, just because we've killed enough of them, let's at least make some money out of this.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why, I mean, there's some elasticity, to how this jizya thing works. But to go back to what I was trying to say is the academic lies. So now when they talk about jizya, professors say, yeah, the jizya was just tax that Christians and Jews had to pay to get protection from surrounding Muslims. That's what they teach, as if the implication is like some Mongol horde is going to come attack and the Muslims are going to go defend the Christians and the Jews. No, the protection's from the Muslims themselves. Okay, that's the protection. You're paying, so it's almost like a mafia racket. You pay me to protect you, and if you don't, I'm going to hurt you. Okay, that's actually how it really expressed itself historically.
So, again, going back to the theme of Islamic immigration in the West, is there any argument for allowing a significant number of female Muslims into countries?
As opposed to males? Like preferring female Muslims as opposed to males? Is there an argument for or against that?
Well, I've heard the argument against male.
Okay, because they're militant, perhaps.
Yeah, but is there an argument? Because I know when we were in Taiwan, many Muslims from Indonesia go with, I think, 10-year visas, if memory serves me correctly. Is that right? And they have almost no problems over there whatsoever. Female Muslims. Is there an argument against female Muslims?
Well, I mean, I think the argument is generically females of all religions and races are less problematic when it comes to the law. I mean, if you look in whatever race, color, religion, or creed, you're going to find more males probably in jail, more males engaged in violence in that sense. So I think it also would agree with the Muslim women thing, but I don't think Muslims in general would allow for that because they're very cohesive. I can't imagine a Muslim family sending their daughters alone. That would actually be very counterproductive because they'd worry that they would assimilate and become corrupt in the West. The whole honor killing thing.
Yeah, I'm curious. Have you followed much of this talk about inbreeding? Have you followed this?
Oh, you mean like the Ilhan Omar marrying her brother and this
Yeah,
sort
well,
of
like
thing?
in certain cultures, Somali, the Pakistanis. I had Colin Wright, evolutionary biologist from the Manhattan Institute, on the show to talk about that. And there have been an old interview with Joe Rogan, and he was a Proud Boy, Gavin McGinnis. He goes over the statistics of inbreeding. In Islamic countries, are there higher incidents of inbreeding?
I think there is. I don't think it's correct, though, to associate it with Islam per se. I think it's more of a cultural practice that really transcends the religious.
But they separate the males and the females, right? So how you
Right.
can't go? There's no dating scene. There's no
No,
bars.
it's just very common for kind of like cousins to marry. Like that's not considered too close.
like
First cousins.
yeah.
I mean, they don't marry the sisters. I mean, maybe they do, but that's kind of considered, that's frowned upon, I think, even amongst Muslims. But it's very common to marry your first cousin.
Wow. So
Culturally.
have you been following the Somali fraud ring at all?
A little bit, but I mean,
It's interesting because many people have claimed that Somalis have IQs equivalent to those people who are mentally disabled, but the fraud empire they build in Minnesota is actually incredible in scale and complexity. Do you think those two things can be squared?
No, I do. There's two ways to look at it. So Somalis, and I know President Trump said this very recently. I don't know if you're familiar with it. He had this sort of like, he crashed out on the Somalis.
Yeah.
They're like
They're walking
terrible,
around
get out of my
killing each other.
country. And
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's some truth to what he's saying. It's one of the most failed states in the world, Somalia. Okay. And at the same time, it's also, radical Islam is par for the course. Somalia, when you look at, and this is a good way to look at a litmus test, one of the ways to see how radical or dysfunctional a society is to look at how the Christian minorities are treated. And it habitually ranks something like second, third worst nation in the world of how it treats Christians and persecutes them. Okay, so that's the mentality that we are bringing in here. And I've dealt with a fair bit of Somalis. I used to work at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and there were a lot of them there. And I wouldn't want to live in the Somali neighborhood, let's put it that way, okay? Very, very tribal. And then the Islamic aspect even gives, solidifies it and gives it that sort of jihadist veneer. But the fact that they were engaged in fraudulent activities, that's no... You'll find a lot of people who can't run their own home and their countries are falling apart, but they're really good at scandalous, fraudulent behavior and exploiting the system. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. That on the one hand, their countries leave much to desire because of their own culture, and on the other hand, that they're exploiting the system, which also we have to add is because of American policies being so liberal and in a way stupid and allowing themselves to be exploited so easily.
Yeah, we've talked about that before in our conversation.
Yeah.
So you've written a lot about how Christians in Nigeria are being slaughtered by Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
But as a culture, Americans never really cared about Africa. For instance, just this year, literally hundreds of thousands of people have died in Sudan alone. And there's been almost complete and total silence from Western media. So why should we suddenly start caring about Christians dying in Nigeria? Like, why does that matter to us?
Well, I mean, the question to me isn't if a person should or shouldn't care. I mean, I think that's up to them. But it's revealing to me. I think that's the more interesting aspect, why people don't care. On the one hand, we're supposed to care when George Floyd, one black man who's a criminal, dies and the whole world, the whole country is set aflame because Black Lives Matter, we're told. On the other hand, as you just indicated, there's a genocide against black people, and we don't even think it's worth mentioning. So there's obviously a disconnect there, and there's a lot of hypocrisy, clearly, thank you, going on. So on the one hand, I think what's happening to Nigerian Christians and all throughout Africa, actually, sub-Saharan Africa, it has many lessons. One, again, is Islam, because the people who are persecuting them are Muslims. In Nigeria, it's entirely an Islamic assault, whether it's Islamic terror groups, Boko Haram, or whether it's the Fulanis, who are just Islamic tribesmen. Or, going back to Somalia, you got El-Shabaab, which is a terrorist organization, and El-Shabaab literally means the youth. So the youth who are pious are terrorists, okay, in Somalia. Mozambique, the Democratic Republic of Congo, they're just, every other month I read about, they trap Christians in a church and set it on fire or behead 50 or 60 of them, So it's mass carnage, all in the name of Islam and jihad and Allah, and Christians are being killed. So at the very least, I think this is a learning experience for Westerners, even if they don't care.
We won't learn.
I know. But at least you see, okay, here's Islam. Here's Islam, when it's the thing about Africa, what's interesting is, for example, Nigeria, where it's a genocide, they're actually about 50-50, population-wise, 50% Christian, 50% Muslim. And that gives you an indication of when Muslims are your strength, it's going to be an all-out war. And you see some of this in Europe as well, because there's actually a theory, and I've written about it before, but depending on the percentage of a Muslim population and a non-Muslim, there's certain dynamics that happen, okay? So when it's very small, like in America, you're gonna have a lot of the crying about human rights and freedom, and we're being persecuted, we are, et cetera. And it makes sense to most Western people. But then as that number grows, it becomes a little more militant, a little more violent. So when you go to Europe, when you go to France, when you go to the UK, it's not just vocal now. Now there's actual violence and aggression.
I have two questions for you.
Okay.
One is the reason for that, and we've had two Muslim apologists on the show, and we've scheduled to have two more come on. In the last interview, he said it's explicitly political. Islam is explicitly political in a way that Christianity, render unto Caesar, is not. Is that one reason? And then the second thing is, immediately before this interview, you said something that was just shocking to me, that 2 churches a day are desecrated in France. I'm utterly blown away, and you wrote about that.
Years
so
ago.
If you could tell us about that, I found that fascinating, if that's okay.
Sure. I'll start with that because that's fresher now, the church thing. Since about 2011, I've been among the different topics and themes that I write about and talk about, one has been the Muslim persecution of Christians. One can say I'm the expert on that. I've written a book, literally. I have a book out on it, Crucified Again. And since 2011 till today, I publish monthly reports. They're published at the Gatestone Institute, each about 4,000 words, okay, which for the month in question, I scour the internet, I have contacts, and I get all the accounts of Muslim persecution of Christians around the world, okay? So the question of what happens to churches in Europe has always been on my radar for the longest time, because it's not necessarily persecution of Christians, but again, it's a litmus test of the hostility for Christians. In fact, I find it more telling when an inanimate object like a church, or even worse, and this even happens just as frequently, attacks and desecration of cemeteries, Christian cemeteries, okay, and breaking crosses and decapitating statues of Mary and exhuming bodies of Christians and spilling them. This is pretty common in Europe and of course in the Islamic world. The most recently it happened in October in Syria, okay, and I saw the pictures, very macabre stuff, just Christian bodies dumped that have been dead for 50 years. Okay, so my point in telling you that is attacks on churches and cemeteries to me really underscore the hatred, more so than an attack on a Christian human. Because when you attack a human, well, there's a human factor here. I know you, you know me. Maybe there's something above and beyond the religious dimension.
I would hope so.
Yeah, but when you're attacking a dead building,
Yeah.
because it has a cross, okay, that tells me what you're really motivated by. So, having really followed this, I came across numerous reports for years about France is just one of them. But I read, and you can probably still find it, but then they expunge it off the internet because I read about it and I wrote it and I hyperlinked it in articles, and then I go back 2 years later and everything I hyperlinked is gone. It's been wiped out. Okay. But if you do your research, you'll find it. And it was I think, a human rights organization complaining about how in France, 2 churches every single day on average are desecrated.
That just blows my mind.
Yeah.
Who's desecrating them?
Okay, so here's the thing. Obviously, most of these attacks, they just happen. Christians come to the church and it's been desecrated. But sometimes there's telling signs, and sometimes the person gets caught. Often it is a Muslim. And there's Arabic writing, Allahu Akbar, and this sort of thing. And they urinate in the baptismal fonts, and they spit on the Eucharist, and they go. And I mean, France is where, of course, those Muslims went in Nice and, cut an 80-year-old priest's throat, right? So these attacks have been going, but it's not just France, okay? So I've read a recent report that came out by I think it's called the Intolerance Observatory, and it was about the rise of anti-Christianism in Europe. And they focused especially on attacks on churches. And what I found very telling is they listed the worst countries in order. And the worst was France. And I think the second or third were Germany and the UK. And I think the fourth was Italy. And what was funny about that is if you look, the numbers actually were commensurate with Islamic populations. So France does have the largest Muslim population. And then whether it's the UK or Germany, I remember looking it up, the number 2 place did have the second highest Muslim population, and the third one had it. So we definitely know Muslims. I wouldn't say it's always Muslims. They claim there's leftists who are attacking them, and Satanists and so forth. It's hard to tell. Satanists. That's what they say. Yeah, that's what they
The 100 Satanists there are. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the majority of it, of course, is Muslims who are doing this and attacking it. And that's why, the Snopes. Are you familiar with Snopes?
Yeah.
So there's a French site, and I think it's called the Islamophobic Observatory. And sometime before or after Notre Dame's burning, which I believe was 2019.
I think that was an accident.
No, I'm not saying it's not, but I'm going to tell you. So right around when that happened, though, they published a map of France, and it showed where they had a red dot for wherever a church was burned or attacked or desecrated. And basically France was red, okay? It was entirely red. You couldn't see a spot that wasn't. And it was kind of like, so we know all those are arson. We know sometimes we catch Muslim culprits who are behind it. But all of a sudden, Notre Dame, they were telling us it was a forensic, or they were telling us it was an accident before the fires were even out, before a forensic analysis could even be done. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't. I don't know. I wasn't there.
Right.
But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if it was arson.
So I know that people are going to be listening to this and say, oh, that's bullshit. So what are some sources about the claims of churches in France? Like, where can somebody go to find out about this?
The problem is, to be honest with you, this stuff disappears. Okay, I mean, if you want, I can pull up my computer and I can find stuff for you. But
send it to us in the.
I will.
Yeah.
I'll send it to you. But if you go on Google and say it, nothing will show up. You have to I have to go into the dark web and the deep net and use these browsers that are not controlled. And you don't ask AI because AI is going to lie and conceal. And
less so Grok and more so ChatGPT.
I just had I did a live stream a few days ago with me and Grok. And do you want to know how bad the lie was?
Really?
You want me to tell you?
Yeah, tell me.
This is an interesting story. And again, it deals with Islam in Europe. So someone sent me a 1-minute video.
Yeah.
And it's about this wise sultan, an Ottoman sultan, who during the Irish famine.
Oh, gave. Yeah.
Are you familiar with this story?
So the guy I had on my show literally just talked to me about this.
Okay, well, let me tell you.
Apologist.
Okay. So the story, for those who don't know, is a young Ottoman sultan heard about the famine of the Irish, and he was just so moved, and he just wanted to send all this money, but the Queen of England blocked him because she was paying less.
That was the story, he said.
Okay, she was paying less, and she said, you're going to embarrass me, so she asked him to pay less, and he did, but then behind her back, he sent ships with foods and supplies, and then it's a place called Drogheda, I guess, where those boats showed up. And the message of the video I watched is, you Irish people owe the Muslims, okay? That's the takeaway. So, the 19th century is not my forte historically. I know a fair bit and can speak with some authority about Islam in Europe. But I was like on the couch, and it was kind of evening, so I had Grok on. I was like, who's this sultan? And it told me the same story. It said, oh, he's this well-known sultan who out of benevolence and altruism did blah, blah, blah. Okay, long story short, I did a whole live stream. I actually put up Grok, and you can see it, and I speak to it. I started pushing it, and then finally said, okay, it was 80% sincerity, 20% realpolitik. Yeah. That's the word I actually used, okay? And I kept pushing it and bringing up points and facts that most people wouldn't know until it said, okay, It said, respect, you got me. It was 95% realpolitik. It was an Ottoman trying to curry favor of the British. He didn't even want to send it until his ministers told him, so they can help him in the Crimean War against Russia.
So, but it didn't tell you that up front.
Well, yeah, and I even told him, well, why didn't you tell me that up front? And it was like, you're right. I should have told you up front, but I decided to give you what the Irish public schools teach. So it's basically saying our Irish public schools lie too.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. I was shocked the level, but the more you push it, so it went from telling me it was 100% a true story, like that guy that you spoke to telling me, it's all lies.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so
That's what we got to deal with this AI business.
Yeah, so I want to explore an area of disagreement that we have. So and please correct me if I'm wrong. So I think we disagree about how Darwinian we should be in our views towards civilizational competition. So do you think a society that doesn't believe in reproduction deserves to continue? And so why shouldn't we just give Western Europe to the Muslims? I mean, they're going to take it eventually anyway. So why not just give it to them now, and we can save lives in the future. We can negotiate a lower tax on non-Muslims. Maybe we can prevent, let the Jews flee. Maybe we can say minimal, only 10 years in prison for homosexuals. I think that's a disagreement that we have.
No, yeah, and I'm more than happy to. But I'd have you first kind of like really articulate what you're saying. Like when you say we give up, I mean, what am I going to give up, or what are you giving up?
Well, I don't live there. I'm not gonna give
What
up
do you
anything.
mean? Like the
I could
Europeans
negotiate
should give
for
up?
them. I could negotiate their surrender for them.
Surrender in what sense? Kind of like to do what exactly?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't worry about the logistics of this. I think this is more the sentiment that it is demographically inevitable that there'll be a takeover.
Right.
And I don't think that they've come, the whole problem, this is a problem of first principles.
Yeah.
The problem is that they have failed to be honest about the problem. So I think the way to think about this problem is to minimize future murder mayhem by negotiating a surrender now.
So you're saying if the Europeans surrender to the Muslims won't have cause to rise up and do terrorism?
No, well, we can figure out, again, this is a logistic issue.
Yeah.
We can divide it between Iran and Saudi Arabia, or maybe we could put Pakistan in there or what have you, because it is inevitable that it will come. I mean, I think we agree on that.
Yeah, okay, so
we disagree, because I don't think there's any political will whatsoever. I don't think they can stop the flow of immigrants. I don't think they're being honest about the problem. I think they're still lying. I think Starmer is still lying about it. I think Sadiq Khan is lying about it. I think they're all lying about it. I think Macron is lying about it. I think they're all lying about it.
All right.
So why not start being honest about it?
Okay, very good. I think that's a great question, observation. So my response is I largely agree with you that they're lying, and even worse. I mean, lying is one way to look at it, but in many ways they're just traitors, to their own nations. It really comes down to the people. So the question is, most people will tell you, well, I don't agree with that. I thought, but I think what you're saying is that the people, whatever they say, and no matter how militant they sound, they're just not going to do anything, is what you're saying.
Well, of course not.
When it's all
I mean, they already haven't done it. So why are they suddenly going to do it?
Because they still have faith in the system. So what if they realize the system doesn't work for them? Okay, theoretically. And but I think it's still a good observation, because I do believe, even if they knew in their heart of their hearts that the system doesn't work for them and they have to rise up, I think many of them can't. And I think that is, for decades, that has been the project of this grand, sort of emasculation of men, or trying to tell men, just enjoy life, and what's this protecting, and whatever, go do whatever. And I think people have become so soft and comfortable that actually when the time comes, and that's by design, so when the time comes, they can't get up and fight. I know a lot of guys in America who are, I'm stockpiling my weapons, I'm doing this and that, and whether that guy will or won't act up on that, even if he does, he's like 1 in a million. He won't matter.
Okay.
Number wise, because most Americans and most Westerners are just so soft.
We also have the Second Amendment here.
Yeah.
They don't have.
Yeah,
and that's
Europe.
all the more reason to think to be
right. Yeah.
concerned.
That's a major issue too. I mean, physically, that they don't have that. But I think, in other words, I'm trying to think of how a European would respond.
I mean, the longer they lie about it, the worse it's just going to be.
But the liars are their leaders, and the problem is the populace are just naive and dumb. The populace needs to understand that it's a broken system. They're not going to come. They don't have your back. Okay. It's not about voting for that guy. This is what I mean. everyone still has this hope. And this is sort of the thing with the United States, you know, Trump, the whole thing with MAGA. And I'm not attacking Trump, but you know, we put all our eggs in one basket. There's one guy who's going to come, one politician's going to take care of it. And the problem is, it's not about that. It's not about this individual politician. It's about the culture itself. The culture is rotten.
Well, that's
the
why I'm
culture is
saying,
dying.
Shouldn't we look at it in a kind of Darwinian way, like the European culture, Western European? I think that's an important qualifier. Please push back if you disagree. Is dying. Their citizenry thinks that there are things they're not worth fighting for. And the thing that you said to me in our last interview that was so interesting is that they're not invading. They're being welcomed in. And so that adds an additional dimension of complicity with this. And so maybe there's just nothing. I mean, if their own people don't think it's worth fighting for, maybe it just deserves
the problem is all
to
the
be
gaslighting.
Islamized.
The problem is all the, okay, so the average people, the normal native Europeans, okay, a lot of them kind of like in a very simple way get it and understand it's wrong, but they just still have so much, when they think, what can I do? Oh, it's about let's vote for that guy. He's going to take care of us. And I think they need to realize, no, that's not going to do it for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's okay. So let me ask you this. So I had a guy, this Muslim apologist, on the show, and I asked him, why is it that Muslims pray in the streets in Western Europe? Again, the key word is Western. You don't see that in Budapest. No. You don't see that in Poland.
Nope.
Why is it
Russia.
why is it they pray in the streets in Western Europe, but they don't do that in Saudi Arabia or Iran? And he said to me, well, it's because it's forbidden under Islam. And I'm saying, well, why do they do it then?
To provoke and to make a point. It's a
Well,
provocation,
I mean,
and it's making a point that we're here, we're taking over.
All right, so let me ask you a question. So I'm going to push back on my own argument. Like, how much pushback do you think there is among Muslims to the Islamization of Europe? And should we really be talking about Muslims as though they're one coherent group? Is there a lot of pushback?
You mean Muslims in Europe who are against the radicalization?
Yeah, Muslims in Europe who are like, man, I don't want Sharia. I like my freedom. You can be. I like a secular state. If because I can be Muslim and I don't care if you're Muslim.
Yeah, I mean, okay, a guy like that probably does exist, but to what extent can we even call him a Muslim at this point? Because if you prefer secularism as opposed to Sharia, then how are you even a Muslim in the first place?
You can't be a cafeteria Muslim?
I mean, you can. No one's going to kill you. Well, I won't kill you. Maybe your relatives will kill you, but you know what I mean? Yeah. But I mean, you can do anything and you can believe in anything. But then there's normative Islam, where, of course, if a Muslim comes up in an Islamic country and says, I disavow Sharia, yeah, you're going to get in trouble, okay? So, and I don't even blame them, because it is intellectually inconsistent to say, I submit. Remember the word Muslim, I submit. Submit to what? To the law of Allah.
Yeah.
So if I say I don't want to submit to the law of Allah, I enjoy secularism, but I'm a Muslim, well, okay, now you're being a hypocrite. So I think there's a lot of people named Muhammad in the West who could fit this profile, but I think in their heart of hearts, they don't even see themselves as Muslims anymore. A lot of these could be, secret apostates or just at most cultural Muslims, okay? But I don't think they're the majority. I think the drive of tribalism and cohesiveness is very compelling for humans in general.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And it's very much manifest amongst Muslims. That's why you see these displays where they go and fall down and pray by the droves. Whereas Europeans, they're very isolated, they're very individualistic. They've kind of been stripped of all sort of cultural mooring, that they have nothing to, to stand, to rally behind anymore. In England, we spoke about it before, just their own flag, the St. George flag became this humongous controversial, scandal.
And they're taking the flags down and erecting Palestinian flags.
Yeah, it is a takeover, and especially in places like the UK. I think what people need to understand is, look, all throughout history, if you want to change and your leaders didn't do it, you resorted to violence. I'm sorry to say it.
Like in Ireland, I have seen videos about people threatening to take the law into their own hands, which I personally do not advocate.
I'm not advocating either. I'm just saying this is the natural consequence. So what did the founding fathers do? I mean, on the one hand, there are these great enlightened luminaries, right? Thomas Jefferson and these people. On the other hand, they rebelled and said, okay, we don't want, taxation with representation, which is nothing compared to what people are suffering now.
Yeah.
Okay? And that was enough for them to go to war, and it was justified. It was seen as a just war. So your average Westerner now is being abused, so incrementally that they've just become used to it, like the boiling frog. They don't even realize how bad it is. But in their mind, they can't conceive that I'm going to actually resort to violence. And part of that is because they've been so, pacified, emasculated. They can't do violence. Yeah. That's the whole program for decades, convincing men, not to be men, not to do anything masculine, violence is the worst thing in the universe, et cetera, et cetera. And
along with racism.
Yeah, well, yeah, with that too, of course.
Yeah, so you write a lot about the dangers of Islam, the problems of Islam, alerting to people. But as far as I can tell, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Southeast Asian Muslims, and I think they're around 250 million, they pose almost no danger to society or to the West. So I'm wondering, is the problem Islam, or is the Islamic culture that's unique to the Middle East?
Islam is inherently, fundamentally, in and of itself, intrinsically violent and intolerant. Period. Now, having said that, whoever subscribes to it, of course, you're going to have a sort of syncretism with their own culture and with their own idiosyncratic societal ways, and that may indeed temper Islamic, how Islam expresses itself. And so, yeah, absolutely. If you look at, but they're not, people have this idea Indonesia and these places are just, they're actually, there's a lot of radicalization there too. There's a lot of violence. There's terrorist groups. There's attacks on churches. So it happens there. It's not quite as bad as, Somalia or Nigeria, but it is there. And those lists that I tell you that rank countries, places like Indonesia will pop up. It won't be anywhere near. It won't be in the top 10, but they're there. So I think, of course, there's room for human culture and society and their own normative expression, and that may, in fact, temper how Islam itself expresses. But Islam itself, the good thing about Islam is it's so black and white. It's not an abstract religion about, as you indicated earlier, it's not about render to Caesar or unto Caesar. It is a political ideology. Okay, when I say I'm a Muslim, I'm submitting. Well, that's an act. It's not an idea. I'm submitting to laws. I embrace these laws. Now, if a Muslim doesn't really follow them, okay. If a Muslim society doesn't follow them, yeah, they can do that. But the religion itself is the religion itself.
So that leads me to my next question. How do you know that Islam is inherently violent? So if you're going just by scripture, isn't that true for Christians as well? The Bible, like come with a sword, etc.?
Right. Okay, so the difference is this. You have the scriptures, but it's not just the scriptures. So you have the calls to violence in the Quran. Then you have what's the hadith, the teachings of Muhammad. Okay, and Muhammad's considered the perfect example. Every Muslim's supposed to follow him. Okay, and the hadith, or the sunnah, which is the example of the prophet as derived from the hadith, is essentially, with the Quran, the twin pillars of Islamic epistemology, if you will. And that is full of violence and intolerance. Okay, so both the Quran and the hadith. More so, the Islamic jurists who are looked upon, the ulama as they're called, have distilled Islamic law based on these two texts. And they conclude that things like jihad is absolutely obligatory, which is I have to go fight and conquer and spread Islam and subjugate the infidel, et cetera, et cetera. That I have to place the dhimmi or, the second-class status, and okay, the whole 9 yards. Okay, so that's Islam. So it's in the text, it's in their law. Okay, and look around Muslim countries, I see it still happening. Okay, so there's a reason that when you look at the 50 worst nations where Christians are being persecuted, 37 are Muslim. Okay, so we got that. Now, Christianity, okay, so the Old Testament certainly is full of violence. The New Testament, you're right. I myself am an advocate. I wrote a book called The Two Swords of Christ, where I reference Jesus in Luke, where he tells his disciples, whoever doesn't have a sword, go sell your garment and buy a sword. And they say, look, Lord, here are two swords, and here, that's enough. Now, to modern day Christians, of course, they allegorize this into meaninglessness. Exactly. It means nothing, okay? To pre-modern, especially medieval Christians, it meant that two swords. One is a spiritual sword against spiritual enemies, which modern day Christians, I think, still acknowledge. But the second sword is a secular sword against material enemies, okay? And that's what they don't acknowledge. Okay, so I myself do believe that the New Testament certainly makes room for just war. Now, the pivotal difference is this. Okay, so I mentioned the texts, and then I mentioned the actual teachings and codification. I don't know of any Christian theologian who says we have to do holy war until the world is converted to Christianity, okay? Because the texts don't support that. They do support self-defense, defending the innocent, the widow, the orphan, and etc. Okay, but they don't. And there's one more other aspect to this, which actually the Old Testament. If you look at the Old Testament, the violence that God, Jehovah, Yahweh calls on the Hebrews to engage in, it's always directed against finite temporal people who have a name and an identity. They fight kill the Jebusites and the Hebusites and et cetera, et cetera.
Interesting, yeah.
Those people no longer exist. So even if I'm reading that, these are not even real people. It's localized to a finite group and time. The Quran doesn't do that. It's a very open-ended language. It says, in the present, fight the non-Muslim. Even though at the time the non-Muslim could have been a Persian, Zoroastrian, a Byzantine. Okay, so it's taken on a transcendent, eternal logic. It's not just, the Hebrews were fighting the people in that region. And, that's the end of it. So I think that's a big difference in my opinion.
So when I go to an Islamic museum, and I went to one where there are scriptures written all over the wall in Melbourne, I noticed that they're all from the beginning of the Quran. Talk to me about that, and talk to me about the law of abrogation.
Sure. So the law of abrogation, which is the most important part, which in Arabic is called al-nasikh wal-mansukh, which means that which is abrogated and that which abrogates, is basically the idea that, so the Quran is supposed to be believed that Muhammad recited it. That's what the word Quran means, to recite, according to what Gabriel, the angel, told him to recite. And it's supposedly based on, literally the words of Allah as delivered. Supposedly, it's almost like the Mormon idea. There's a stele with the same words in heaven in Arabic. And so the Quran was recited. Muhammad supposedly gets his first revelation around 610. And they continue until 632 when he dies, okay? Now, they got just thrown into a book later on as the Quran, and they're not, and they were actually organized by length. A surah is essentially a chapter, and they just put the longest chapter first and the shortest at the very end. If you read it like that, it literally makes no sense. I mean, at best, it's poetry, and you don't even know what's going on, which is another reason why the hadith is so important, because the hadith talks about events in his life that then Muslims correspond to what's being said in the Quran, and then they try to make sense of it. But there are contradictions within the Quran. So the apologists that you probably meet often will tell you things like, the Quran says there's no compulsion in religion.
Exactly.
You have your religion, I have mine.
Right.
That is in the Quran, okay? But here's the thing, Muhammad, in Muhammad's career, when he started preaching and speaking the Quran around 610, he was living in Mecca. And so the Islamic scholars have differentiated two phases. There's the revelations, the verses that came out when he was in Mecca, the older ones, and then there's the ones when he went to Medina. Now, when he was in Mecca, he was outnumbered, he was weak, he had at most something like 100 followers, and he was being bullied and pushed around by the pagan Quraysh tribe. That's when he said, you have your religion, I have mine. Let's all respect each other, okay? Let's learn to coexist. There's no compulsion in religion. That's when that came out. Then he did in 622 the Hijrah, where he went.
Oh, that's right.
He went to Medina, and now he became a tribal warlord. He became strong, he had followers, and then all of a sudden Allah started giving him more militant, more aggressive, offensive, going on the offensive verses.
And those are in the end of the Quran.
So yes, because it's now his later time, right?
Yeah, so I asked my Quran teacher this. The law of abrogation isn't in the Quran.
No, there is actually a verse that says something about, we give you something, but when a better thing comes along, we'll give you that.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, so the idea is Allah is giving Muhammad these rules as he goes along, but as Muhammad's circumstances change, Allah gives him a different modus operandi to follow. So if Muhammad is weak, then he obviously is telling him, well, don't rock the boat. Tell them we all live. Now you're strong. Well, so the verses, for example, that I said, 929 and 9:5, okay, those are the latest. Surah 9, Surah Al-Tawbah. And those are the most militant verses. They're the ones that say, 929 says, fight the people of the book until they pay tribute or die. 9:5 is even more open-ended. It just says, lay in wait for the pagans wherever you find them, kill them, ambush them, and take them as slaves. Okay? Those are much later. That's the final word. So it's seen now amongst Muslims that this is Allah's final word. He gave him the more tolerant ones earlier on because it was necessary. And the other view, which is actually even more dangerous, is Muslims say this, and I've encountered this often. They say, yes, both versions, the Mecca and Medina Quran, meaning the tolerant one and the more violent one, are still perfectly applicable, and it depends on where the Muslim finds himself in society. So if you find yourself in a weakened position, you should preach the peaceful ones. You have your religion, I have mine. If you find yourself stronger, then you should also go on the offensive. And I'm going to share with you a final amusing anecdote.
Sure.
Which deals with a Somali. And this is back at the Library of Congress where I worked. And, he was a pious Muslim. And I actually liked and respected him, and because, he's I know we don't share the same theology and philosophy ultimately, okay? But, he was a no-nonsense kind of family guy and very traditional. Okay. And we would have debates, though, theological debates. He was kind of like the patriarch of his clan.
Yeah.
And I mentioned all this because he was telling me, no, you're wrong. He seemed radical, but he would tell me, no, Islam is peace. It's not. He would do all that. So one time in a cafeteria, I kept pushing him and telling him this story. And I kept saying, well, what about the Mecca verses and the abrogation? And I said, Mecca is when Muhammad's weak, and this is how he asked. And he finally got frustrated. And he said, well, what do you want from me? I live in Mecca, meaning DC, meaning I'm outnumbered. Yeah. I'm around infidels. Of course I'm going to say this. Okay.
Oh, that's interesting. So do you believe that peaceful Western Muslims are practicing taqiyya?
I think
say the word
taqiyya.
Taqiyya.
Yeah, and that's another
deceit. Do you believe that peaceful non-Muslims, peaceful Western Muslims are practicing?
I believe a lot of them could be, and I know a lot of them have been caught doing this. There's stories of. I remember writing about a story in Turkey where a group of Muslims went to a church. Christians are very minority there, and they went to a church and they got to know the pastor and his family, and they feigned interest, and some of them got baptized, and then they got busted. It was all a big plot to murder him. Okay, like that's the lengths they went to just to do it. So deception in Islam is a permissible thing, and especially in the context of taqiyya. Okay.
In the service of the religion only, though, right?
Okay,
or
so
no?
the thing about taqiyya is its most authentic expression is you are being, persecuted, and so it's very different than Christianity. If a Christian comes to a Muslim, puts a sword to his head, and says, "I want you to renounce Muhammad," traditionally a Christian martyr says no, and he dies.
Right.
Muhammad himself actually advocated, tell them renounce me, renounce Islam, and do whatever you have to do. Okay, so it's a very pragmatic take. But yes, the taqiyya or the deception in general is a real thing. I wouldn't say every single Muslim's doing it. I think a lot of real Muslims actually are dissatisfied with Islam. I think they would leave it if they could without repercussion. So I think some of them are also, they could be sincere.
So is there any actual data or concrete evidence of rates of deceit? How would you get that?
I don't think, can you imagine Europe actually trying to conduct that kind of survey?
No.
How politically incorrect that would be.
Yeah.
But I do know, I've read about oftentimes, a Muslim terrorist.
And they'd lie in the survey, so
Yeah, exactly. But also I've read about Muslim terrorists being arrested, and then they go through a rehabilitation program in the UK where they tell, they give them moderate versions and have them play ping pong.
Oh yeah, in Malmo, Sweden, they have the same thing.
And then they pass with flying colors, and they go, okay, and then a week later they let them out and they go and commit another terrorist crime.
Right.
Okay. So it's unfortunate because Islamic deception mixed with Western stupidity and naivety is just a really bad combo.
What would you do if you were surrounded and they pulled out their swords and they said, Raymond, convert to Islam or it's off with your head? What would you say?
I guess I would do some taqiyya, maybe.
No.
I don't know.
Because you're a Christian, so what would you say?
You'd have to put me in that situation because you know what? It's very easy for me to say. I would say cut my head off. That's probably my instinct if I wanted to give you a bold answer. But I don't know. When the time comes, who knows what would happen? I hope I would stand for my principles because death is not the do-all and be-all and everything.
Because you believe in an afterlife.
I do believe in afterlife. I'm not a materialist.
Yeah.
We should have this conversation. Actually.
I'll have any conversation with
Yeah.
you want.
You want to have it now?
Anything.
So one of the issues, and I think this is what plagues Europeans and Westerners in general vis-a-vis Islam, but really this is a fundamental issue, I think. And, let me start it this way. Okay, you're an avowed atheist, right?
Avowed. I don't know how avowed I am. I just don't think there's sufficient evidence to warrant belief. But if
Okay.
I were given the evidence, I'd believe.
Okay. Fine. I'm not talking about you, but let's say, what I'm going to say is I think
You can talk about me,
atheists-
that's fine.
Okay, I think atheists are actually intellectually honest with themselves in the sense that their conclusions match their premises. And I think the main premise of an atheist, of a Western secularist, is that they're materialists in the sense, not in a hedonistic sense, but that their epistemology is governed by material.
Yeah, I'm a naturalist.
Yeah, okay, exactly. So the only thing that's real to you is what you see and can feel with your senses.
There's no supernatural realm for me.
Right. In other words, as long as you can see and feel it, it's real. But if I give you an abstract idea or even God,
No, it's a little more nuanced than, I mean, as we're sitting here in LA and Dawkins has very kindly given us his studio, this space, he is also a naturalist. I think that naturalistic explanations, I always seek a naturalistic explanation, and you can de facto rule out any supernatural explanation for any phenomena.
it's like Occam's razor, right?
Kind of, yeah. There's just no evidence at all for the supernatural.
No, I get it. What
Yeah.
I'm saying is I'm just trying to make a distinction here,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is basically that.
Maybe I'm not getting it, so go ahead.
No, well, yeah. All I'm trying to say is that I think the Western epistemology,
Yeah.
in general, is materialistic, which means it only acknowledges that which is physical.
The material realm.
The
Yeah,
material
yeah, yeah.
realm.
Okay, I'm with you. I buy that. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And I think I think that's how an atheist would describe himself, and so their conclusions match that.
Correct.
The problem is you have these religious people, and in the current context, let's say Christians in Europe and in the West, who claim to believe in, God. And then once you believe in God, what you've done is you've accepted the metaphysical, okay? Now you're talking about that which is beyond the physical. I think the word spiritual is actually synonymous with physical, which is ironic because a lot of Christians will say, I'm spiritual, but you're not. And this is my point.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Christians, even though they say they believe in, once you say you believe in God, well, it's not just believing in God, it's believing in a whole host of morals and ethics and a whole
Right,
system.
right.
But that entire system is metaphysical, okay? That's the whole point. And I think Christians, despite themselves, despite what they say,
Right.
are materialists. And so when it all comes down to it, all they really still believe in is the physical, which means, they'll tell you don't hurt someone, don't commit murder. That's the absolute worst.
interesting. Yeah,
But
yeah.
historically, Christians, the physical violence was, of course, that's frowned upon. It's a sin to kill. But that was the least of the bad sins, errors that a person can do. Most of them had a metaphysical substance to them, which is to say they were abstract. But today, even amongst Christians themselves, there are no abstract truths. The number one good is do not physically hurt someone.
Right.
Because they're materialists. So when you apply this kind of logic and you look at Europe and what's happening with Islam, well, Muslims are not like that because Muslims actually do have a metaphysical system and a code of ethics which is above and beyond the physical. So I think when you put those two groups, one which, all it believes is in, hey, let's just not physically hurt each other, that's all that matters, but anything else goes, and the other group actually has a very rigid and somewhat draconian system that it passionately believes in. Okay, well, I start seeing your point about maybe it's time for them to capitulate, the Europeans, because it's a lost battle. And I think a lot of it actually has to do with this lack of metaphysics.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Given that, it would seem you don't have a kind of Pollyanna attitude. Are you pessimistic about Europe, Western Europe?
Yeah. Oh, I'm very pessimistic.
Do you think it's in hospice?
Yeah, I mean, you can say
I do
it's-
as well.
I think I think the problem is Europeans and Westerners in general, their brain has been so compromised and addled. In other words, if you could bring back, let's say, let's go back 100 years ago and bring back your average European person and just show them what's happening, I don't think they could believe it in a million years. They would think this is like a movie. This is not real. This is my country, Britain. Now it's become, like 30%, or London's been taken over by Muslims who are openly engaged in jihad, and then my government is putting people in jail for noticing it. I don't think they could even begin to comprehend. And so that's
Or
my
the barriers around Christmas markets
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
routinely
We
see
saw
in
that too.
Western Europe,
Yeah.
not in Poland or Hungary.
Yeah, I can't. That's what I'm trying to say. It's been a slow, slippery slide. The burning, the boiling frog analogy. I always like that because it just happens slowly, and you get inured to it, and you're accustomed to it, and you just think that's how life is. But if you can bring someone back to see what's happening, I think they could not begin in a million years to understand what's going on. That's how crazy it is.
So you and I share that view. We are incredibly pessimistic about Western Europe.
Oh yeah, I'm very pessimistic. I think it's gonna have to get much worse before it can even get better.
For sure.
And Western men,
unless they capitulate, unless they surrender.
And Western men specifically are gonna have to stand up
that won't
and stop standing behind their women.
You know that won't happen.
Well, and if it doesn't, like you said, they are destined to go extinct. And I guess, yeah, I agree. Hey, I have no sympathy for any species or human who doesn't want to preserve themselves. Okay.
Yeah.
And what I am seeing, I agree with you. It's self-done. I mean, a lot of them again will point to their leaders, right? But it's like, at what point are you going to realize your leaders don't have your back? And pointing at them and complaining and waiting for another leader. I don't know. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Where do you stand in terms of the future of the U.S. with this issue? Are you optimistic, pessimistic?
I think the U.S. is just essentially and a lot of Americans like to tell you, oh, we're not like the Europeans. No, I think America's on the same trajectory. Not necessarily with the Islam, but due to the demographics, because Muslims in America are nothing like in Europe. They're still here, obviously, and they're still a factor.
And they're skilled. We import skill.
Yeah.
And there's a different
and they're more assimilated because they're fewer in numbers.
And we have a history of assimilation that the Europeans don't have.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. When you go to Europe, it's like America is a hodgepodge. I mean, it started, of course, mostly white. But you had Europeans, you had Irish, you had Germans, then you had Italians, and you had Spaniards, and you had the French. So it always had that sort of But you throw in a Somali in Sweden, So you got Swedes and then you got Somalis. Okay, it's very stark. So I do think America is a little more conducive to assimilation in general. This is not to say that there isn't a potential Muslim problem, but at this point, it's just due to the numbers and demographics. It's nowhere near as like France or the UK.
Yeah,
but it's on its way.
I mean, are you concerned what's going to happen to the world when Western Europe falls?
Am I concerned?
I'm concerned. I'm even more than concerned.
I mean, yeah, concerned, but it's just, look, if people don't want to, if in your own vein, if people don't want to do what's needed to do, then what? I'm one guy. What am I going to do?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel. I'm one guy too.
Yeah, at that point is when I start, worrying about taking care of myself and my own because society failed. Hopefully it doesn't. The good thing, though, and I think we can talk a little bit about it because you've alluded to it a little bit, is Eastern Europe is not like this.
Eastern Europe, not at all.
So in a way, it seems like maybe the
I have my own speculation as to why, but
well, why don't you tell me?
I think it's because they survived communism
and Islam.
And Islam,
right? Because
And
Hungary
right.
was under 150 years of Islamic rule.
Yeah.
Or Viktor Orban said that once when they said, "Why don't you want to take in immigrants?" He said, "Because we've lived under 150 years of Islamic rule, and we don't want any more."
So, The Two Swords of Christ, published by Bombardier, your latest book. Please tell me about it.
Thanks. It fits in very much with everything we're talking about, ironically. And that wasn't even my intentional goal, but it just goes to show you how everything is sort of converging to the same point. And one of my fortes is the history of military interaction between Europe, the West, Christendom, and Islam historically. And this book does the same thing, but it's written through the lives and the eyes of the military orders, specifically the Knights of the Temple and the Hospital against Islam. And what's interesting about that is here's a perfect example who these guys were and what they became. These were, for their times, the most pious religious Christians that you can think of, okay? And I'll give you a little bit about their origins, but let's talk about the Hospitallers, for example. Who were they? They were the first hospice. They're the founders of our idea of a hospital, okay? And when Christian pilgrims would go to Jerusalem to visit the Holy Sepulchre in the Holy Land, they would get attacked by Muslims. And even if they didn't get attacked by the time they reached there, they were walking from Europe. They'd need a hospice. So the hospitalers were just monks who were dedicated to serving travelers, Christian pilgrims, giving them rest, food, aid, healing them, basic medical services as they needed. And then and the verses, the biblical verses that they would quote are things about, loving your fellow man and, the sorts of things that your average Western Christian thinks is great because it's good and passive, okay, and it's loving. But then they soon realized that, instead of always waiting until Christians come and get savaged by Muslims, which is what happened because, even though the Holy Land was under Crusader control, it was still a kingdom in an Islamic sea surrounded by Muslims. So it was normal. So they decided that, okay, we're now going to protect Christians before they get killed. And so they became militarized in that sense. And they became, amongst the most feared warriors on the one hand, but on the other hand, they still maintained the charity, the benevolence, they were hospice workers. So on the one hand, they're in the field fighting brutally. On the other hand, they're like washing people's feet and feeding them and giving them their beds and taking care of their... So I mentioned that to you, and one of the reasons I wanted to write it is to show you just how on the one, to a modern day Christian, that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Okay, they understand the first part, the hospice and the mercy, but that can be fused with militancy, they could not begin to comprehend. And yet these Christians did, and the Templars, it's a very similar story, did, and they quote the Bible, and they refer to the Bible, and there's this and that verse. So my point is, it's, as much as what I call doormat Christians of the West today are convinced that, their religion begins and ends with themselves being doormats who must never ever object or complain or criticize, and that's what God wants, that's what Jesus is all about. You had these guys who were the complete opposite. They were actually much more pious than your average Christian, okay, but they did something. They fought and they were violent, and they engaged in holy war. So I find their example very interesting, including for our times, as a lesson. Of it's not this idea, and I think honestly, when we talk about the death of Europe, it's this idea that's taken hold that to be a Christian is to be a doormat. I honestly believe that is the background of it. And, of course you will say, well, a lot of Christians, or a lot of Europeans are atheists. It doesn't even matter. But they too, haven't you noticed that your average Western secular or Christian and your Western, secularists are kind of like interchangeable? You can't tell a difference. They live the same way. They see the same thing. This goes back to what I was saying, is that they're both materialists, even though one is intellectually honest, the atheist, and one is not, because he claims he believes in metaphysical ideals, but he doesn't.
Yeah, two things. My friend, my very good close friend, Faisal Al-Mutar, said something to me that was very interesting. He's a guy from Iraq. He's like the most American person I know. He founded Ideas Beyond Borders, and he translates Enlightenment texts into Arabic. And I asked him, why doesn't everybody want secularism? Why doesn't the most hardcore Muslim want secularism? And he laughed, and he said, well, my reasoning was then he could practice his religion, you could practice your religion, you're Jewish Christian, she could practice, or someone could practice no religion. And he laughed and he said, it's not that they don't want you to practice your religion, it's that they want you to practice their religion. So their de facto, the default is against secularism.
Yeah, I think religion itself is the de facto against secularism, because think about what it implies.
Yeah.
If Christians get along and they say, hey, atheists, you can live with us, and of course this is how it is, right? Atheists and whoever live together. I think the flaw with that, and what pre-modern Christians would object to that, is it's implicitly admitting my religion is not true.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people want to do that, because once you do that, if I as a Christian say, hey, I believe, Jews and Muslims and Buddhists and we're all equal, well, inherent in that idea is that I'm not right.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right? I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, it sounds good. It's good for coexistence. But inherent in that idea is that, so why am I following this religion?
Yeah, it's interesting.
If it's not true?
I had wondered if, and I'll just throw this out there. Let's say that you believe, you're a Christian, I'm not a Christian. like, maybe we need to cultivate people who have your belief system as a bulwark against Islam. But if I say that to an atheist, and I don't mean obviously every atheist, and yes, I'm broadly generalizing, but atheists are largely in the orbit of critical social justice. They're largely on the identitarian left, and they don't see any difference. They see a kind of weird combination of relativism and egalitarianism, and they'd be like, well, why wouldn't I want to live under Sharia? Why wouldn't I want to, like, queers for Palestine?
Right. No, what you're saying, and again, what you're saying actually ties up to what I was saying with this sort of dichotomy about material and metaphysical.
Exactly.
Because the atheist, why wouldn't he, of course? It's all physical. As long as you're not hurting me and I'm not hurting you, then who cares? The rest is relative.
Yeah.
Okay? The problem is that too many Christians think the same way. So I agree with you that Christianity, historical, traditional, muscular Christianity is needed as a bulwark. Because that is what kept, remember, historically, Islam conquered 3/4 of the Christian world. Most people don't know that. And what prevented it from actually taking over Europe when Islam was the behemoth, when Islam was the powerhouse, especially in the guise of the Ottoman Empire, was that Christians fought tooth and nail and were convinced that that was right, which to fight and
you'll
resist.
never have that again.
Yeah. Okay, so that is what kept Islam out historically. Now, the West is much more powerful than Islam, militarily, economically, infrastructurally, and it's suffering. Why? Because it's lost that spirit, which was fused with Christianity, believe it or not. So I agree with you that on the one hand, the atheists, the leftists, the paradigms that they operate under are such that they're fundamentally relativistic, humanistic, social justice warrior nonsense. So what's left is the Christian paradigm, but the problem is too many Christians are materialists and therefore subscribe to the same leftist delusions.
Precisely. I remember reading a case of a woman who was raped by an immigrant, and they caught the guy, and she insisted that she didn't want him prosecuted because she feared he'd be sent back.
I've even read about one, I think in Norway or Sweden, where a man was raped by, I think, a Somali.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And he did the same thing.
Yeah.
Where I don't want him sent back because he might get hurt. Yeah, you see what we're dealing with?
I mean, I don't...
This goes back to your point about suicide.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there's no help for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I find the whole thing incredibly depressing. I really do. But you know what's and I'm going to ask if you think there's a glimmer of hope. But you know what I think? I find many of the Muslims with whom I interact to be really honest people. Like, that's what I find. And when I speak to some people, I won't name them, they're like, yeah, we're going to take over. I'm like, well, there's a guy I respect, right?
Yeah.
No, but you can totally respect that. He's completely honest with you.
I do.
He's like, well, and that's also a guy you can have a conversation with.
Yeah.
Like, I really respect the Christians when they say, you're going to go to hell.
Yeah.
I completely respect that.
I know.
That's a person you can have a conversation with.
Yeah.
They're not like, well,
they have convictions.
There's many gods, and we all have our own way
and
there.
I respect
and
whatever you
like,
want.
Yeah, like, that's just, give me a fucking break.
It's
dude.
tiresome.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, just be honest.
You're spineless. You have nothing to offer.
Yeah.
Okay. Give me something. Give me a belief. Give me a conviction, even if I reject it. And that's the other thing about Muslims. I think we spoke about this, but I like Muslims.
Yeah,
people are surprised to hear this.
I actually do too. Yeah,
like if you put me in a room of Muslims and they don't know who I am and what I write, I can get along with them pretty well. I'll start rapping in Arabic, and we'll be fine.
Yeah,
we'll see eye to eye about a lot of things because they're not monsters.
The trans. Yeah, like I actually like to do jujitsu with Muslims. I find them to be excellent training partners.
Yeah, they still believe, look, they're masculine.
Yeah.
Okay, they still believe I'm a man, she's a woman. I have
They know what a woman is.
Yeah.
They figured that out.
Yeah, when their parliament talks about what a woman is, they can answer it. So wow, they're heroic in that sense, right?
Yeah. Do you have anything that you can offer people to be a little hopeful? Because maybe, people in Western Europe are watching this. Or do you have anything?
I don't want to give false hope because that's all they've been getting is false hope. That's what's made them complacent. Okay, so no, you should be scared. And I think another reason that too many Europeans don't care, and it's very selfish, but they've been bred to be selfish, is because, you know what? A lot of them don't have children anymore. They're not even having children. And so a lot of them, I think in their minds, like, I'm whatever my age is, I'll be dead soon. I won't have to deal with a full takeover.
Yeah,
It'll
yeah.
be good enough for me,
Yeah.
I think that's also kind of the thinking.
Selfishness.
It's very selfish. So really the hope is the younger generation that, they stand up. And this Gen Z, and they seem in many ways kind of I always have this theory that, generations, they get worse and worse and worse. But there's some possible hope for this Gen Z because they seem to sort of be above, they break all the molds.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily sissies and whatever. And they may be, maybe.
Sissies, I love that word.
Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know, I love that word. Before we go to the lightning round, may I offer some hope?
Please.
People? My hope is that the Overton window is moving on surrender. It's moving on, and the sooner you accomplish this, the easier it's going to be, the lower your tax will be. So I think that's a reason for hope, is enough people who have received a critical mass now where people realize that the civilization is over.
How would you, not necessarily give me detailed logistics, but
Yeah, the logistics
nothing detailed, but just like a general overview when you say surrender, because I'm sure a lot of people are saying, like, what are you talking about? Surrender to who? Who's surrendering? Like, what do you mean exactly?
For example, the UK and Western Europe, we could divvy.
Let's look at the UK. Like, what should they do?
We would divvy it up between various Islamic states. Maybe we could give the northern Wales and Scotland,
So dissolve basically the parliament and
Well, of
now
course.
and let Muslim countries rule it, and they'll rule you justly because you've given in.
Yeah, and the sooner you do it, the better. I mean, I think that's the reason for optimism here. But
You're not being facetious.
No, but I'm going to tell you something.
All right.
You're laughing now, but you're not going to be laughing in 10
No,
years.
no, I'm not
You're
I'm
not
not-
going to be laughing in 10 years.
I'm not laughing because I think this is
You're going to be like, holy shit, that was prescient.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe. But if it is, man, if it is, then you know what? They deserve it. They deserve
Well, that's
worse.
what I'm telling
They
you.
deserve worse.
But I'm telling you, they
if
deserve-
that's
of
how
course they
bad it
deserve
is.
it.
If that's how bad it is, that
Now,
they
we'll-
could do something, but I mean, you're talking about the worst people in the world, that they basically gave up all their land and all their rights that their forefathers fought and died for.
Yeah.
And these guys, because they can't do anything but sit around and hashtag, have given it all up.
Okay.
So yeah, they deserve the worst that they get.
Okay, well, I go around the world and I ask people one simple question. What would it take to change your mind? I'm going to answer my own question. Here's what it would take to change my mind that surrender is inevitable. Stop illegal immigration.
No, that's
If you
pretty
can
easy.
stop illegal immigration, I will believe that your society, your civilization has a chance of surviving.
Now, this is obviously directed to the leaders, right? Because they're the ones who are in charge.
They're not going to do it.
Yeah.
But that would be my defeasibility,
Right.
my conditions
So
under
why
which
do
I
you
would
think they're
change my
not
mind.
doing it? I mean,
I think
can't
it's
they do it
utterly impossible.
to stop immigration?
No, well, they just had
Hungary doesn't do it.
Well,
Poland.
yeah, Hungary is fined €1 million a day for not taking migrants. And you know what I have to say about that? It's a fucking bargain.
Yeah.
It's a bargain
Because
of
they
a
can actually
lifetime.
celebrate Christmas.
Yeah, well, Reed and I were there. We're walking around. We're hanging out. Did you ever feel threatened or unsafe even one time? So I just think.
As opposed to London or...
Well, yeah. or France. And Reed and I are going to go into some of the places in France where people were beheaded. I'm very excited about that. And we're going to talk to people, and we're going to have, my goal is to have honest conversations with people about this. And again, I've had Muslims on the show. I have you on the show. I have Islamic apologists on the show. Anybody, my golden rule is I will have anyone on the show who has not harassed me. Like you're hyper qualified. Like you can't just be a random dude on the street. So you have the credentials and you want to be an Islamic apologist. I'm happy to have you on the show. I believe in, I genuinely believe
You believe in
discourse.
debate, not censorship.
I do.
I do too.
Believe in discourse. I believe in conversations. I try, and it's more interesting to people if I get a mix of range. It's more interesting to me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do a lightning round. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. So the lightning round will consist of a few questions,
Are these going to be off color again?
well, we did a thing in New York.
You're talking about you and me and...
You,
Callum.
me, and Callum, we did something in the Comedy Cellar in New York, which is great. That video will come out soon. That was fun.
All right.
People are going to like that. So here's the lightning round. If you had to import 1 million Indonesian Muslims or 1 million Somalis, which would you choose?
Indonesians.
Why?
Because I'm familiar with Indonesian culture and society and crime rates, and I'm the same with Somalis, and they are completely different.
Okay.
Meaning that the former is much more acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you had to gain one oppression variable, for example, woman, black, gay, disabled, etc., Which would you choose and why?
Myself?
Yes.
List them again.
Well, woman, black, gay, disabled, etc.
Woman, black, gay. I'll take etc.
Really, some other impression
Well,
variable
yeah,
has a name.
something that has no name to it.
Really interesting.
Because that leaves the door open.
Right. Okay. So what would that be?
Well, you said etc.
Yeah, we got to pick
Etc.
one.
is generic.
You got to pick one.
Well, how about a bad knee? I really do have a
I have a bad knee too. So disabled.
Yeah, physically.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I don't want to be in a wheelchair, but I already am disabled, so I'm familiar with that.
Okay.
The other things I just don't know.
Okay. Well, this is perhaps the most difficult question of all. So imagine just for a moment that I'm the leader of a trans rights movement. Make the case to me as to why I should support your vision of America over an Islamic vision of America.
That's going to be very hard, and I think we already touched upon this, the whole materialist versus metaphysical thing, because the trans person, by definition, I think, is beyond relativist, okay? I think to be a trans, you have to be a relativist, which means there's no right or wrong, there's no absolutes, there's no truth, okay? So and my vision, I don't know what you mean by my vision, you mean like a Christian traditional society?
I don't know, whatever it is.
As opposed to an Islamic one?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
I'm the leader of a trans.
Okay.
I'm a prominent leader of the trans rights movement. And say, well, why should I take your vision of America over the Islamic version of America?
Because the Islamic version of America is actually, and it's part of their law, is to execute homosexuals. Specifically,
But in Iran, they all convert homosexuals. They just give them surgeries, right? There is no homosexuality in Iran.
I've heard about that. I don't know how legit that is. I don't know if that's like a fake thing.
But they do that to gays, not trans, though.
That they give them surgery in Iran.
That's my understanding.
I don't. I know I've heard that, and it's been going on around lately. I would really be shocked if that's what Iran does. That is so contrary to everything else I know about that country.
Enforced gender transition, but I'm certainly open to.
It may, I don't know, maybe they have like one or two cases, but I don't think this is something that's like standard there.
So what would you say if again, I'm going back to the Queers for Palestine thing, or the Queers for Hamas thing, which when Reed and I were at UCLA, we explicitly saw that. So why is your version of America better than Islamic? Like Islamic, or Europe?
Because my version of America, I would not have trans or homosexuals persecuted or killed or anything like that. I wouldn't also, at the same time, to be honest with you, especially the trans stuff, I would not validate that. I wouldn't have that, publicized and celebrated.
What happens to them?
What do you mean?
The trans people, like in your vision of America?
They can do whatever they want, but it's kind of like, I don't want this stuff being pushed on children. Children are impressionable. We have a responsibility for young minds, okay? And it's not right to kind of put sexual confusion in the first thing they have to encounter right away when they're young. I don't mind you do what you do in your own home. I certainly don't want to enter in anyone's house and arrest them. I could care less.
People can do what they want in the privacy of their own home.
It's but don't normalize, don't standardize it, especially when we have vulnerable, innocent, impressionable minds, okay? Let them actually grow up their own way. And if they end up going that way, they go that way. But don't, this is kind of like a grooming thing.
Should two women be able to kiss in public?
I won't stone them, okay?
Okay, so what does that mean, yes or no?
Should they?
Should they be allowed to?
I don't know. What are the laws? Don't we have like indecency laws? I don't know if it's covered or not covered.
Should a man and woman be allowed to kiss in public?
I'm not too fond of that, even that. Just to show you that it's not even about homosexual or heterosexual. I just think intimacy it shouldn't be cheapened like that. I think intimacy is good. But when you do it kind of publicly, and I don't want to be such a prune, but it's just, I don't know. I'm not going to enforce a law personally. But I do know there's decency and indecency laws.
What about hand holding? Should two women or two men be allowed to hold hands in a romantic way in public?
That reminds me just of a funny anecdote. When I went to Egypt and I was younger, I didn't understand this, but like every guy walking around, every two guys had their arms, like it's called engagé. And I just remember looking at one of my relatives who I just met. I'm like, is everyone here gay?
Yeah.
And they're like, no. This is like good friends,
Yeah.
So
You
anyway,
don't have to worry about that after the interview when we're at dinner. We're good. You don't have to, you can wipe that off your plate. So should two dudes be allowed to hold hands? Should two women be allowed?
I don't. Yeah, I'm not gonna. I wouldn't enforce a law about hand holding, and even the kissing thing. I'm expressing my own personal belief.
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
don't. I don't think intimate acts should be publicized. It just kind of like cheapens
Yeah.
them. That's all.
Yeah.
Whether it's a man or a woman, it's just kind of like. Unless you have this overwhelming desire to kiss this woman or whatever at this moment, but I don't know. It's not my kind of thing.
Okay. Well,
I'm a traditionalist.
I would have to plead guilty to that.
I mean, we could all plead guilty. I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's just a matter of, you're asking me my views. But
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
none of this I would enforce as law.
Yeah, okay, so
this is my
that's-
personal idea.
that's the difference.
I wouldn't want to do that.
Right. Okay. So, a couple more questions. You've been generous with your time. Thanks.
Sure.
Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask you?
Well, I mean, we did a lot about Islam in the West. I guess one of the themes I was thinking about the other day, and it's not even a question, but I'll elaborate on it a little bit if you have a moment. And it's so funny because I wrote a lot of articles from like 20 years ago, and they just keep coming to my mind as how applicable they are right now. And one of them was a little ditty I wrote, and it was called the Islamic Schoolyard Bully. And what I explained in that article, and basically what it comes down to is, I think the schoolyard bully paradigm is so good at understanding Islam today. And what I mean by that is, okay, so what is the schoolyard bully? So he shows up and you meet him and he sizes you up right away, okay? And he sees how much he can get away with. Maybe he starts pushing you around, he wants your lunch money.
Right.
And the more you acquiesce and give in, what does he do? He gets more aggressive, doesn't he? But then if you give him a big shot, a punch in the
appeasement
nose,
doesn't work.
you give him a punch in the nose, he actually becomes like your best friend, and he looks up to you. That to me, as someone who's very familiar with the history of Islam, is very much emblematic of Islamic behavior historically. Okay, and
And you have studied this for your whole.
Oh yeah,
This is what you literally.
this is what I do, and
Yeah.
so I'll give you an example from history. We already talked. I think people will get the idea about the jihad and the violence and the attacks on the West and all the non-Muslim world. But in the colonial era, okay, the tables were changed. Okay, this is when. Remember, people don't realize this because they always, when they think of Islam in the West, it starts with the colonial era in their mind.
Right,
And they
exactly.
think like, oh, Muslims are always these poor brown people being abused by these white imperialists. Actually, it was the opposite. For a millennium, Muslims were the ones who were the stronger, attacking the Europeans. Okay, so anyway, finally you get the colonial era, and what happens is you get a very dominant European, Western Christian culture that spreads out in the Islamic world. And what do the Muslims do? Do they rise up in violence? They actually immediately get in line and try to copy them as much as they could. The number one Muslim country that was the scourge of Europe, or the Ottoman Empire essentially in Turkey, is the first one to actually turn its back on Islamization. It gets rid of the Arabic script. Turkish was written in
Ataturk,
Arabic. Ataturk, and then they adopt the Roman alphabet. They got rid of the beards and the Islamic dress. If you look at pictures of Egypt or Iran, people know that, but even the countries you don't think of as being moderate in any way, like I said, Egypt, from the 30s and 40s and 50s, all the women are in dresses, their hair's down, no one's wearing a hijab, they're in high heels, all the men are in suits and ties, clean shaven. Okay, and this is like the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So my logic is when the West exuded power and confidence, what Muslims did is they gravitated towards it. They wanted to, it's like, as Osama bin Laden said, everyone likes a strong horse, okay? And they followed it. But at the same time, what's happening now is the West is buckling, losing confidence, and becoming acquiescent and appeasing. So let's go back to the schoolyard bully. And guess what? He's now starting to lose respect, and he's starting to push him around. And the more the West says, oh, whatever you want, and but I don't mean to judge, and the more he spits at it and pushes it and attacks it, okay? So I think that is a very useful paradigm to understand it.
Yeah, it's interesting. If I may relate a story, I was teaching a new atheism class years ago at a university I will not name. And I had a question on the midterm, is Islam a race? I can't remember exactly, but it was something like multiple choice, and then I think fill in the blank and some, and then extensive essays, like 5 essays, pick 3, something like that. And Islam is a race, yes, no, or true, false, something. And the kind of the hint that I gave people before this is you can't convert into a race. Like I can't say, well, tomorrow I'm going to be Japanese or Southeast Asian. And I had so many people complain about that question that I had to remove it from the
What's the
test
complaint?
bank. Does it matter?
Well, yeah, I'm trying to.
Well, their
how can you-
sensitivities were offended.
because they believe that Islam is a race?
Because they believe that any kind of identification on racial grounds with anyone is a kind of a moral wrong. And people can weaponize the idea of Islam against people who are of a different race. So I couldn't ask, is Islam a race? Or Islam is a race. I can't remember exactly how I phrased it. Because that itself was considered to be racist, and I had to remove it from the test bank.
I think acknowledging the word race makes you a racist at this point, based on what you're telling me.
Well, yeah, you should have seen when I was in Crazyville. I mean, it was like truly peak crazy. Okay, so last question. Is there anything at all you'd like to ask me?
Islam in general, or
Anything you want about anything. The only thing I don't talk about in these interviews is my personal life. We'll
Okay.
save that for dinner.
All right, yeah. Okay, let's say you do want to see Europe make a comeback, and what would you have it do? What are the steps?
Awesome question.
Yeah.
That is an awesome question. The first order of business is you have to stop immigration. There has to be a moratorium on all immigration. I don't think Europe is capable of being honest with itself at
Why?
any level
Why?
about anything.
Let's stop with that. Why?
I think they don't think that there are things worth fighting for. I think some of it is white guilt, some of it is colonial guilt. I think it's a combination of, as Gad said suicidal empathy, coined that phrase. I think it's an idea of, I know Muhammad's a good dude, therefore, so I think that factors into it. I think relativism and egalitarianism have eaten us down for so long. I think that the first principles and the fundamental principles that bound us they're corrupted and corroded. I think the mainstream media outlets are organs of the left. And if I say that, that doesn't mean I'm on the right. That just means that's a criticism. And I think they've been fed healthy dosages of propaganda for decades. So I think that the ocean of propositions in which people are swimming, I don't even think that they realize how bad the problem is, how bad the situation is.
Yeah.
And so the first order of business is you have to end migration. Because if I lived in a sane world, I wouldn't say that. Here's what I would say. We have to acknowledge that certain immigrants are net detractors from the Treasury, and they're guilty of, it is more likely if someone comes from country X that they will be incarcerated. And less likely if someone comes from country Y, Japan being the paradigmatic. But you can't say that because people are not.
That's the problem.
They're
You
not
can't say that.
Well, they're not capable of the nuance.
You can't say truth, is what you're saying.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the other thing. Europe is in this problem because of first principles, because they have failed to be honest. They are not, they are lying. And they continue to lie. And I mean, I don't live there. I mean, what am I supposed to? They've had enough American hegemony. I don't live there. Trump has said they're going to take away NATO. They got problems with the Russians. The Poles have conscription. I mean, we got Europe has a lot of problems. But the first order of business, you need an absolute unconditional moratorium on migration. The second order of business is, I'm going to say this, people are going to lose their shit, but it's true. You have to start shooting people if they attempt to come over the border.
Yeah.
There's simply no other way to keep people out.
Yeah. I actually
But
agree.
if somebody has another way, I'm completely willing to listen to it. I think the cameraman left. Did that offend you? I think it offended him so deeply he left the room.
Are you serious?
Yeah, that's why he left. He shook his head and left. But I don't know what's the only other solution to that.
Yeah. I think
Reed, let's bring the camera guy up here and ask him his solution. Get him up here and we'll mic him up, and I'll ask him what his solution
actually, because
is.
your position's not that bad. The point is, why are you breaking the law? Okay, you're breaking the law, and there's repercussions. You're not the innocent one here. I mean, in other words, I agree with you. And
But if anybody else has a solution, I'm willing to hear the solution. I mean, I don't know what the solution would be other than you have to have a moratorium, and if people try to come to the border, you have to shoot them.
The thing is, you know, I've said
What
this
is the
before.
other solution?
The thing that I've said before, which I just people don't get this, is, you know, especially Europeans and Americans. I might have told you this before, but, you know, when you look at the world population, the whites are like 6-7%.
Yeah.
They're already a minority,
Yeah.
and yet it's they who who feel it's their job, their moral right, their moral duty to always let everyone take their country.
Yeah.
Even though they're the tiny minority, and you know, the world is flooding with blacks and browns and yellows or whatever, but the whites are the ones that it's, you know, oh, you're a bad person because you don't give up your land.
Hey, if you
What is that?
if you disagree, did you leave because you disagreed?
No, I just needed to go use the bathroom real quick.
But you didn't leave because you disagreed with anything?
No.
Oh, okay. Because I'm going to say, if you disagreed, I'm more than willing to have a conversation with you about it.
I appreciate that. Maybe we could do that at the end of the shoot.
I mean, we'll get it on film right now.
I appreciate that. I don't feel like,
If you don't want to appear, maybe he can ask it, and we can speak without
Yeah, I
his
mean, if you have
physically
a-
appearing.
Can I ask this question? I mean,
You can ask me
seem to
anything
have
you want.
Strong feelings about finding the murder of Charlie Kirk absolutely wrong, which I agree. But then to say in the same sentence, we should be shooting people for just being a refugee, trying to flee violent conditions, trying to make a better life for themselves.
Okay.
I mean, so I just-
Give it to me in a sentence, because I'm going to repeat what you said. I want to make sure that I get it right.
Sure. I just think it's, you're either, I don't think you can denounce political violence, especially like really nasty political violence, like shooting someone, while calling for that political violence against people you judge to be political enemies.
Okay, so I just want to get this in a sentence. So your problem with what I was saying is you don't think I can denounce the murder of Charlie Kirk and advocate for shooting people who come to a country illegally. Did I get that
Correct,
right?
because- yes, that's right. Because I think laws are, inherently malleable.
Okay.
I mean, at one point it was illegal for a black person to go into a white-only establishment.
Yeah.
I think that a refugee, for example, has a right to come to, who's fleeing violence, has a right to come to another country.
okay.
So what I found offensive, though, is just you
Yeah.
saying shooting those people, because to me, that is similar to what you were denouncing earlier, which I agree with. We shouldn't kill our political enemies. I think
agree, yeah.
calling for shooting and killing people that you have that disagreement with, to me, that made me feel about how you would probably feel if someone said they were pro shooting and killing Charlie Kirk.
So what would your solution be to illegal immigration in Europe?
Well, I think Muslims make a small percentage of the immigrants in Europe, or the population in Europe. It's something like 5 to 10%. I don't think immigration is actually a problem. If you look at statistics, undocumented immigrants commit less crimes and less violent crimes.
But that doesn't answer the question, though. So what is the solution to illegal immigration in Europe?
Well,
I gave you my
it does
solution.
answer the question, because in your question, you're
Yeah.
implying that there's a problem that needs to be solved.
I
So the
am.
way I'm answering that is I'm saying that implication is false.
Okay.
And the facts don't support your feelings about the issue. And the facts are
Yeah.
that, especially in America, undocumented immigrants commit less
But
crimes.
we're talking about Western Europe.
So we're talking about Western Europe.
Yes.
I believe the statistics are fairly similar. I looked it up while you were talking, and there are more hate crimes against Muslims than there are hate crimes against Christians. And I understand that's a topic of debate, but to pretend that a minority that's 5 to 10% of the population is somehow oppressing 80% of the rest of the population, I don't think facts support that. And I think calling for shooting people, I think is over the line. I think that's over the line in the same way that you probably felt when you saw someone shot and killed Charlie Kirk because they disagreed with him. I think that's just deeply objectionable rhetoric, especially right now.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand your position correctly. So you don't think there's a problem with illegal immigration?
I think whether immigration is legal or illegal is arbitrary.
Okay. So you think that we should allow people to come, not
So
we, but
you had based your argument on the idea that people are coming into this country without being quote unquote vetted. Right.
we're talking about, I just want to be clear, we're talking about Western Europe
Okay,
in the
sure,
context
sure.
of this conversation.
Well, I think basically if there's not a legal process to immigrate, then the term illegal immigration becomes a misnomer, because what you actually have a problem with is immigration, not illegal immigration, immigration in general.
What if a country said, we don't want immigrants? Is that okay?
If a country said what?
We don't want immigrants.
Well, and I would say that I'm a white person, you're a white person, you're a white person.
I'm not a white person.
I apologize for assuming if you're not white, and I apologize genuinely for that. My ancestors came to this country, and there were other people living here.
Let's say Europe. We were talking about Europe. Let's say the UK says we're British, and Germany says we're Germans. We don't want non-whatever into our country. Do they have that right?
Well, and what I would say is that's when we back up and we look at the history of imperialism. If you want to talk about violence, if you want to talk...
But yes or no? I'm looking for a yes or no.
Well, of course you're looking for a simple answer because, but what I'm actually doing is rhetorically unpacking what you're implying and how that breaks down once you start
No, it's a country saying, look, we're a sovereign nation. We are the country
Okay, well, but I was answering
Sweden.
that. So I was answering that. You have to look at, for example, why are there so many Muslims immigrating to Europe?
Because it's a better life there.
Because over the last couple decades, the U.S., with their European allies, killed over 1 million people and destabilized the entire region. Most of the people coming to Europe are refugees from European actions. So it's entirely hypocritical to say that you have no right to be here when we... And when I say
you're making a humanitarian argument, in other words.
It is a humanitarian argument, absolutely.
Okay. So I'm just trying to think of how this translates into policy.
Sure.
In the context of Western Europe specifically.
Sure.
So does a country have a right to say, we're going to close our borders?
I think that immigration is a human right.
Okay. So
in
you
the
think
same
that
way,
just to be clear, I want to be clear. In position.
Yes.
If Saudi Arabia said, we don't want non-Muslims, this is our country, we are a Muslim country, and we don't want non-Muslims, do you have a problem with that?
Absolutely. I would say that's deeply oppressive.
But that is what they do.
Exactly.
Actually.
And that's my thing. I'm against that sort of policy. I'm against bigotry. I'm against closing the borders. I'm against... I think immigration is a human right. I'm against dictatorship. I'm against the dictatorship in Saudi Arabia, and I'm also against oppression of Muslims here in America as well. I believe in freedom, which means the freedom to be Christian and the freedom to be Muslim, wherever you are in the world.
How about the freedom to have my own country without anyone coming in?
I don't think that is a reasonable... No, I don't believe in that. I would describe that, and to give you an analogy, I would say that say the Jim Crow era, someone could have made a similar argument. Do I have the freedom to go into a place without people of different races? And I would say no, because that's impinging on their freedom, and that's not actually a free society.
Yeah, but I mean, America's a different example because the slaves were brought here. I get that.
I'd like to keep talking about Western Europe. I mean, if you really want to talk about America, we can, but we're talking about...
I think that the issues are very analogous, but I understand. Go ahead.
He asked me my solution for what should be done. And did I get that wrong? You asked.
What does Europe need to do?
We start with the UK.
And then you called for shooting people. And so that made me feel about probably how you would feel if suddenly I called for shooting someone who you respected.
But see, can I answer that? Because it strikes me as a little different. Here's what he's saying, I think, is this. America's a sovereign nation, or any nation, not just America. Let's say Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia decides we have borders, and we don't want anyone coming illegally, okay? You can maybe apply legally, and we'll figure it out. Okay, we've made our position known. This is our nation. These are our borders. Now, once someone knowingly says, I'm going to try to get there, isn't that kind of their fault? They've now stuck themselves, they've put themselves in this position where they're the bad guys, whereas the Charlie Kirk example, no, this is a person who said, I don't like your political views and I'm going to murder you. So I don't really think they're analogous.
I think that, let's agree on one thing. Killing someone is really bad.
Yeah, but
shooting and killing someone?
Bad, but I made a law. This is our land. You're an outsider. That's how the world works. Every country's like that.
So if someone were to propose that we shoot and kill...
you chose to break in.
If someone were to propose that we shoot and kill, say, people who violate the speed limit, I would say that's very gross and very bad.
Yeah, well, okay. But
okay, so now you understand.
Yeah.
Now you understand that just because it's illegal, that proposing to shoot and kill them, that's deeply offensive.
He's saying that because we don't do that, and nobody respects us, and they do it, and they break the law. So obviously the response has to be raised up, and the repercussions have to be greater. Not because we want to do that, but people need to respect and fear the law. That's how it works.
So you feel that anybody should just be allowed to come to Western Europe who wants to come?
Yes, I believe
Okay,
that.
well, that's a different. Okay, that's,
And also,
that's-
I would go
okay.
so far as to meet you halfway and say there should be a vetting process. And this is my issue, and this is the big issue, is because people aren't being refused access because they're being vetted and it's determined that they're not allowed because they don't meet some requirements. They're being refused access because en masse, they only allow a small amount of people. So it's not that people are trying to get in who fail a vetting process. It's that immigration itself is being banned, and that's being pretended like that's about a vetting process. But it's not about a vetting process. It's about excluding what I feel like is a human right, the right to leave a war-torn country and make a better life for yourself.
Okay, so let's go back to the original claim. He asked me about Western Europe, what I do. When I asked him, are there any questions you'd like to ask me? And I went through a litany of things that I thought I would do. I mentioned shooting, and if any of this, my recollection is an error, please let me know. I'm jumping ahead, you offered to meet me halfway and say you think you should have a vetting process. My argument to you would be you haven't answered the question. What do you do with people who go to Western Europe illegally? You still have people coming in dinghies.
I would say that I would say you would treat that like a minor crime in this instance. If, one, that it is actually possible to immigrate if you pass a vetting process, which, by the way, it's not. You need a lot of money and a lot of resources, and they only allow a small amount. So realistically, immigration is not possible for people. But two, if someone does break what I would consider a minor crime, which is crossing a border, that they should be treated and that should be assessed in the same way of, for example, somebody speeding, which is a minor crime that would require appropriate consequences and not, for example, shooting them.
Okay.
And just to say why I walked out, one of my best friends is an undocumented immigrant.
Yeah.
And you suggesting that he be shot for what I don't even consider to be a crime.
Is he in Western Europe?
He's not.
Okay, so let's go back to this. So we have the country of the UK, the United Kingdom, in England. We make a law, we say we're going to vet people, and we still have, what is it, Matt Goodwin's statistic and Eric Kaufman, 183,000 people entering the country. And you want to treat that like a speeding violation.
Do you know how many speeding violations there are a day?
No, I just want to make sure that I understand the argument.
Yeah. That's not basically. I don't think it's a crime to cross the border.
Okay, so
it's a totally
I think, say
modern.
the truth. I think you don't even care. Like if someone breaks and enters illegally, I think you think it's okay. You probably are rooting for them, right?
Because that would be a crime. I'm saying it's a crime to break into someone's house and steal something. And if someone does a crime, they should be punished for a crime. I'm saying it's not a crime to immigrate. Do you think
so you don't believe in sovereignty of a nation?
I mean, honestly, I think that sovereignty is largely something that is used to oppress people.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. Thank you for being honest. So now I know exactly what you believe. And so if we try to agree upon something and meet me halfway, I don't think that's meeting halfway because it doesn't answer the question.
I think I answered your question, but
well,
go
the
ahead.
idea is that is there any number of illegal immigrants that we shouldn't, like if 10 million people wanted to come into the UK or on dinghies in a year, we would just treat that like a speeding violations for those individuals?
Realistically, it would be fine. The number you...
Well, that's honest. That's honest.
The number you proposed was, I think, hyperbolic, and would realistically, when you look at the facts, when undocumented or not, when immigrants go to a community, that community benefits.
I'm not talking about the benefits argument. I'm talking about if people, there is no upper limit of people, you think, before we say absolutely no more.
That's right. I think
that's honest.
Humans have, since the dawn of time, been born to migrate. I think it's a human right.
I'm going to wish you something. I wish to consign you and your family and all of your posterity to lives that you want to create, because you're pretty much going to create that in Western Europe. And I wish to consign you to that life. I wish you to give you the very thing you want. I would wish nothing else upon you than that.
Sorry, I'm not understanding what you're trying to communicate to me right now.
I'm trying to communicate in the context of Western Europe, you're getting the world that you want. And it will,
Sure.
it is, yeah, I'm positive of that. All of the data indicate that the world that you're advocating is coming. And we'll see the consequences of that.
I mean, I think all of the world has lots of problems, but I would say the biggest one is racism and anti-immigrant racism, authoritarianism. I think those are the big problems. And I ultimately think when you're comparing things like violence against Christians and violence against Muslims, you have to go back like 10, 20 years. A Christian country killed 1 million Muslims in an invasion in the Middle East. And that is the context in which this immigration is taking place.
Which country is this?
What's that?
Which country is this?
This was the United States.
The United States
During
is a
the-
Christian country?
So George
Really?
W. Bush, during the invasion, very
And he may have engaged
directly
in terminology, but
very
yeah.
directly said, cited
Crusade.
God. Yes, if you look
A
at
crusade,
the
he said it was a
statistics,
crusade, yeah.
if you look at the statistics of
He
Congress,
wasn't doing it for Christian reasons. though,
almost
but-
all of, almost every person in power in this country is Christian.
I'm an atheist, so I don't know what, but I'm just glad that you were honest with me and said there's no upper limit to illegal immigration in Western Europe, because you're going to get the society that you want.
Well, and I think that would be a better society. And the reality
Great,
is,
we're about to find out.
I
You
think the
are what
reality
they
is,
call, and I've never really encountered one, and I'm happy to do so, and this isn't an offense, but you are what they call a woke person, aren't you?
I would say so. I think.
And what you experienced when you stormed out, that's called triggering.
Was I
Were you
triggered
triggered?
when you
This is all new
when
to
somebody
me.
called for the
yeah.
violent shooting of one of my friends? Absolutely.
Is your friend Western European?
Do you remember? He is an immigrant. You specifically called for the shooting of immigrants.
Illegal
My friend is an immigrant.
Illegal immigrants, not immigrants, and in the context of Western Europe.
Again, whether it's legal or illegal, and again, undocumented person is the term I use because it's arbitrary.
Use any term you want.
It's arbitrary, but yes.
So you think it's arbitrary? You think the conditions by which one should enter the country are... So if
Well,
someone's
yeah, he said countries have no sovereignty.
but if someone's a serial rapist, a serial child, a pedophile,
That's your
that
opinion.
it's
Okay.
arbitrary.
Okay, those are interesting reasons why someone would be denied access. Do you think that's why people are being denied access?
Those are interesting reasons.
I would support denying someone access who is guilty of those things. That's not why people are denied access.
And what do you do if boatloads of them are coming over? What do you do? What do you do? You're in charge of the government.
That's literally how our entire country was built.
But to answer the
And
question,
this-
you're in charge of the UK.
Well, I am answering it.
Refugee
I'm literally
system.
answering it. That's
Okay.
how all of America was built. Do you think
Okay.
America?
All right. So obviously we cannot distinguish between America and Western Europe. I've tried repeatedly. So let's talk about the United States then.
Okay, we could talk about the
Okay.
UK if you want.
No, we've tried that. It hasn't worked. So let's talk about the UK.
Well,
so
you
we
were
have-
trying to suggest that it's a problem.
Time out, guys, just for a second. We do have to turn over the room in like 35 minutes.
Okay. So go ahead.
You know what? But I will say, I appreciate you hearing me out. It sounds like we may have to end this argument.
Why? We have plenty of time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I just heard that we have
No, we have. I'm totally. You have time.
half an hour.
I have totally time. I'm totally talk to you all day. So, again, we don't have to talk about Western Europe if that's.
I don't think it's a
not-
problem when people immigrate. I don't think it's bad for the
Okay,
country.
but let's go back to answer
and
the
I
question.
don't think immigration laws actually stop people from immigrating.
Okay,
they
but-
just create a lower tier of worker who they can pay less and oppress.
I hear you, and let's
Yes.
go back to the question.
Okay.
We have a boatload of rapists, murderers, and pedophiles coming in.
Completely
to-
false premise.
Well, I mean, it could
Can
happen.
you entertain the hypothetical?
Yeah, hypothetical.
Can you entertain that hypothetical?
Okay, I will entertain the hypothetical,
Okay.
and yes.
Okay,
I
we
would
have a
say in that
boatload-
case,
yes,
that
what do we
is a
do?
situation where I would be sympathetic to the idea that they would not be permitted access.
But they're on
that
a dinghy. How do you how do you not let them come?
Well,
what do you do?
I would say that
He's going to bring them in and then safely send them back.
I would say that in the current context, there is no legal way to come in a vetted way. So it's...
So what do? We have a boatload of people who are murderers, pedophiles, rapists.
And this is also what I would say.
Yeah. What do we do with those people?
Undocumented immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than citizens.
This is a hypothetical.
Okay.
I'm asking you a simple question. You are the head.
Do I think people should be denied immigration?
No.
Based on past criminal history?
No,
I'm sympathetic to that.
This is the question in plain language. You're in charge of immigration policy, in charge of the borders in the UK. You know for a fact that this is a hypothetical, that boatloads of rapists, child pedophiles, and mass murderers are entering your country on dinghies. What do you do?
So I would say that so for us to have that information means that we would be able to stop them.
How would you stop them?
Physically, how would you physically stop them?
What would you do to stop them?
Detain them and then deport them. If potentially, I'm sympathetic to that argument. My point is that
how would you stop? What would you do to stop them? Because
the same way you stop someone who's shoplifting, the same way you stop someone who's...
You'd apprehend them?
So you'd intervene in all the boats. Any of the boats coming in, you'd intervene and vet people?
Not necessarily. I think immigration is a natural part of life. I think, for example, if they are, for example, the criminals you describe, that we should have evidence against them that they did those crimes before we detain them and stop them. Wow.
Well, you're going to get exactly the kind of Western Europe that you want. We are already creating it.
What is so scary? What is so scary about an immigrant to you? They're less likely to commit crimes.
I think you said in the last. Let me answer your question.
Well, I'm going to say I want to reduce the crime rate.
You just asked me a question.
This is what I would say.
Did you just ask me a question?
I did, and I'm giving context.
Let me answer your question.
Go ahead.
You said in my last interview with James Klug, did you not?
Say that again?
Didn't you sit in my last interview with James Klug?
Yes.
Yeah, and you explicitly heard me say that I'm pro-immigrant, that I'm pro-H-1B visas, that I'm vehemently opposed to illegal immigration, and that it's bewildering to me why people cannot differentiate between illegal immigration and legal immigration.
And here's the answer that I was screaming in my head. Obviously, it would have been inappropriate for me to say it. It's very obvious. It's not a hard answer.
Okay.
The amount of immigrants they allow is so small that it effectively makes all immigration illegal, meaning it's not possible to legally immigrate.
Who's they?
The governments, these government regulations.
What government?
All these governments, all Western governments, all the countries we're talking about. My wife was an immigrant. I'm pretty familiar with the process. It's when someone comes here, quote unquote, illegally, it's not that they were too lazy or hiding their criminal past. It's because these countries don't allow people to immigrate here legally.
Right? Isn't it the nation's right to say, okay, we only want X amount because we don't want, for whatever reason, we don't want our demography to be overwhelmed in 10, 20 years.
No, I would say no.
That's not
I would say
right?
no. I would say it's not a right.
It's a genuine difference of opinion.
And same reason I'm against Jim Crow laws. I'm saying if you're interested in preserving demography, well, that's how people sounded during Jim Crow era. They said, hey, if we allow different races into these...
Here's the thing. I think people like you assume that the people who do this are all white. Blacks, browns, and yellows do the same thing. If you told them, hey, we're going to introduce a boatload of whites to the point where you're going to become maybe a minority, blacks, browns, and yellows would resist it even more so
and
than
you
whites.
Think that
so it's not a racial thing. It's just a human thing. This is our country. We want it our way, our culture, and our people. That's just the world. It's not like a white racial thing.
It's definitely a white racial thing. You have to look at the culture of imperialism. You have to look at the direction in which people are immigrating. So why is it that white people are not refugees to Iraq?
Because nobody wants to go to Iraq.
And
everyone wants to go to white countries because that's where all the goodies are.
Oh, and what happened in Iraq? to make it so bad and
Okay,
destabilize.
But why don't
that
they
a million
want?
people
Why
could
doesn't
die
anyone
there.
want to go to Somalia and Kenya and Nigeria and Afghanistan and Uzbekistan
Libya.
and Libya? Is that
did
all
Britain,
the U.S.?
So did Britain or Europe have anything interesting historically going on in the last few hundred years in the continent of Africa?
Oh yeah, it
And-
actually brought medicine, science, technology.
Okay, so you think
progress,
colonialism
governance,
is good, and I think
and,
that is such a
and
fundamental
Africans say
difference
that.
of opinion.
Africans say that. Africans say that we learned all that because before the colonial era, Africans were living basically almost like on a stone
Okay,
level.
well, I think that's a
historical.
fundamental difference of opinion.
Have you read anything that goes contrary to your opinion? Have you read
I've
Bruce?
been listening to it for the last 2 hours while you sat there saying nobody ever can present an argument against me. I'm presenting them to you right now.
I can use another beer.
Have you read any arguments against your position?
Of course.
Okay, give me an example of something you've read.
I just listened to all your arguments.
Okay, but
against my position.
have you read Bruce Gillies' The Case for Colonialism? That's the seminal piece that
I mean,
argues
I think
for
this is a
colonialism.
weird argument tactic because I could also be like, here's my book that proves my opinion. You should read this. Like, why haven't you read this? Like,
What would you say about someone on the other side if he had never read anything who disagreed with him? Would you say that he was ignorant?
so you think I haven't read things I disagree with?
I'm asking you, give me a
I
specific...
guess he's asking you that your positions, are they based on a deep reading or are they maybe more emotional and ephemeral based on social media?
if they're based on
and
a
that's
deep
the
reading,
thing.
what have you
I
read?
think that actually, while you guys are up here talking, I was fact checking you. Which, by the way, I would recommend getting a Jamie, from Joe Rogan's podcast.
What did we say
so,
that
like, for
you
example,
fact-checked
But that
and came out
doesn't
wrong?
answer the question. The question is, what
well,
have you...
no, because it
what
was
have you read
implied
against
that
your
I'm
position?
emotional and
Well,
I'm
you-
not
well, you
fact
got
based.
triggered.
And I would say that the opposite is the case. I would
Okay.
say that I'm the one who's looking at facts. You are the one who is leaning on emotions such as bigotry and racism to form your opinions, and you are backing into what you want to be true against what is the reality.
Okay, so let's answer the question, and then I'd like to come back and give you an opportunity to address the racism claim. Because I
Is
think
this all,
that's...
by the way, like going to be on, which is fine
I
by
hope
me.
so.
No, okay.
I hope so.
No.
So you haven't read anything that was positive about colonialism? Because
I
you
would
said
say
you have,
that
and
the
I'm still not-
entire, of course I have.
Okay, give me an
I would say
example
that's
of a
the
thing.
dominant ideology. Is
Give me an example.
positive
What
about-
is colonial? Can you
Yeah.
summarize the colonial era? Like, what was the pros or cons or all cons? What was it?
I would say that that's a big question, and I don't think it's.
As you know it, in a couple
yeah.
sentences. I know you're not an
Sure,
expert.
this feels like a little bit of a trap because you're asking me to define what is an extremely complex and big subject. But to put it basically, I would say that it is European powers at a certain point in history basically started carving up the world and extracting raw resources from around the world and engaging in genocide and slavery. And in fact, that was obviously the foundation of this country as well.
Okay, let me ask you this. And what you just said is actually pretty mainstream. So, did any other civilizations do this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so
Can you name one? Because you're familiar with what Europe did.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm against Muslim imperialism and American imperialism. That's the difference between you and I. You, for example, are bigoted against gay people very clearly.
I'm not bigoted. I just,
And
He's bigoted
but at the
against gay
same
people?
time, you seem to have a chip on your shoulder as if you are superior to the bigotry that also exists in Muslim countries. And I would say that I'm against both forms of bigotry. I'm actually against bigotry.
I like where he's going with it, but I'm a little confused.
I'm a little confused. Do you think I'm against gay people too?
I don't know your opinions on it. I would say the way that you answered the question of when you specifically asked about
Holding hands?
same-sex partners
Kissing
being,
hands?
Yes,
Kissing?
and also same-sex partners specifically.
Yes.
Yes, I detected that was bigotry. You guys also used the term sissy, which is an anti-gay slur.
Is it? Okay.
I would
I
say
thought
that it is,
sissy
yeah.
means like a wimpy guy, but
That's
okay.
what I thought. Maybe it's a generational thing. But okay, so I'm curious, what did we say that was racist to you? And do you think Islam is a race?
I would say that, for example, your belief that that Muslims are somehow taking over Europe when they are a minority that's 5 to 10% of Western Europe and are actually more susceptible to hate crimes than are likely to commit them, I would say that that's a racist opinion because it's not supported by facts.
You're using this word racist,
Yeah, I'm
which
curious
everyone knows
how-
has been weaponized.
Well,
I mean, what does that even mean?
well,
It's a
hold on.
racist
I mean, it
thing.
means judging people based on their ethnicity or their race or the color of their
Well, in
skin.
this
has
case,
been
it's a
defined.
religion.
This was defined
We're
in like
talking
the
about a religion, not a
1950s.
race.
But wait a second. Maybe is Islam a race?
Well, I think race is a complex social construct, and that's the reality. And of course, that's going to be a scary answer, but that's the facts.
Okay.
Because if you look
So
at,
Islam
for example,
could be
the
a
way
race.
May I ask where you were educated?
no.
I'm just curious. You went to college, clearly.
Yes, of course. I'm not answering that question.
Okay.
That's a deeply condescending question. I don't think it's appropriate
Why?
to what's going on right now.
Why is that?
Because
condescending?
I wouldn't ask that to you.
Well,
Where
I'll
were
tell
you
I went to
educated?
Marquette
Tell me what college
University. I
you
got
went.
my doctorate from PSU. I went
But-
to Fordham. I got my philosophy
go to
degree.
Berkeley?
I would say
or
the
somewhere in
reality
LA?
is race is a social construct. For example, in-groups and out-groups are defined at different times for different reasons. So
Correct.
I'm Irish and Italian.
That's correct.
At one point, that was not considered to be a white person,
That's
so to
correct.
speak.
My grandparents were in the same category.
Of course.
That is correct.
So that's when I say racism is definitely real, but in reality, race, we are all one human race. And race is a science, is actually a social construct, is what my answer
So
would be.
what is? We're going to bracket that for a second because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. What did we say that was racist?
I thought we were talking about a religion.
Well,
no, but
I
these
would,
things are the same.
I,
So
I, thought,
what-
I thought I answered your question. I would say it's
Yeah.
racist to suggest that Muslims are somehow oppressing Europe by their existence. That's what was racist.
They're
because the
engaged
reality
in-
is they are a
okay, so I'll
minority
give you an
and they are
example.
more
In
likely
the
to be
UK
subject to violence than to commit it.
In the UK, in Germany, and in a lot of these Western European nations, sex crimes, for example, are wildly disproportionately performed by Muslim.
I just gotta feed my cats.
You're not pissed, right? All right. Muslim migrants. Okay, this is documented. It's
Well, let's-
wildly
do you accept that?
disproportionate.
Do you accept that?
Well, I think we should look at the sources because something interesting happened
If you do
earlier
the
in
sources
this
thing,
conversation.
then I can do the same thing. You know,
Well-
I can say your sources are all made up.
Well,
or
that's
something.
that's what happened earlier in this conversation is that you made a pretty outrageous
Which one?
claim about churches being attacked.
And you went on the internet and you didn't find it. And I also told you, I
And,
told
and when
him,
you were called to task about to present that source, you basically said what people say when they don't have a source.
no, I said
you
I'll go on my computer. I have the old links, but if you do a Google search, you won't find it, is what I said. I can find it. Okay.
Now, I respect that you
Did you
work
hear
for
what
a
I
university.
said about Grok?
I don't think that stands up. I don't think that's how a reasonable person conducts things to say like, oh, I have the evidence, but then I lost it because my computer lost it or whatever.
I didn't say my computer. I
that,
said that it gets expunged off the internet.
It
I'll
gets
write an
expunged
article.
off
I'll
the
put
internet.
hyperlinks to the sources. They work. 3 years later, all those sources are gone.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I just want to go back to the claim because that's a pretty weighty accusation. I think it's a weighty accusation that we said something that's racist. And the idea is that, and I want to make sure that I understand your position correctly. The idea is that a criticism of Islamic immigration is by proxy a criticism of race.
I would say that the criticism you got that has been made here today,
Yes.
the way that it was made is fundamentally racist because it doesn't match reality and it is basically rooted in the idea of I'm scared of Muslims and I don't want to live with them.
Okay, so let's
You're
talk.
an Islamophobe.
Yeah,
Not you.
racist.
Well, he didn't
yes,
say
you-
that, well, but we are,
Yeah,
or
we're
you
Islamophobe.
are
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
particular, you are.
And-
So but when you say the reality, are you disputing the crime statistics that he gave, for example, of Somalis in Western Europe? Are you disputing those statistics?
I am, yeah.
Okay, so you're disputing the statistics. So what evidence would be sufficient to persuade you that?
Nothing.
Well, we would have to look at we would have to sit down and look at the evidence. Yeah.
Okay, so if I gave you in detail the evidence from Jan van der Beek, or if I gave you Eric Kaufman's data, and you showed and you looked at this data, would you be willing to change your mind?
Well, and then I think, first of all,
Yes or no? It's yes
It's
or
a
no.
hypothetical.
well, yes, I
Let's
know
say
you
you
like
saw
to
it.
ask yes or no questions.
Well, you asked me
because
that
it
question.
doesn't allow me to unpack the implications.
We don't have time.
Within your
Why
question.
don't you ask me the
And
question?
so
Ask me
this-
the question.
Excuse
Ask
me,
the
I
very
am
question
answering your
asked you.
question. Your question is, would that change my mind about immigration? And then what I would say is,
No, that's not what the question
okay,
was.
what was the question?
The question is, would it change your mind that you said, you accused Raymond in particular of not operating in reality about the crime statistics? If I showed you those statistics about taking from the Treasury and incarceration rates, would you be willing to change your mind?
About, would I be willing
Exactly what I just said about certain
about
groups.
these arguments being racist?
No.
I gave the example that Muslim migrants in these various European countries are wildly disproportionate in their sexual assaults. It's something
That's
like
not-
out of every
that's-
10, 8 of them
Okay,
are...
Not the evidence I've seen.
Okay.
But he said if you did
but
see
this
it.
is a hypothetical.
Okay.
So if I were-
hypothetically,
Yes.
if you were right, you would be right. And hypothetically, if I was right, I would be right. That's how that works.
Okay. When you entertain a hypothetical,
Mm-hmm.
you accept by fiat the condition of the argument. So hypothetically, if I gave you data by, I only know two off the top of my head, Eric Kaufman and I can't pronounce the guy's name, it's a complicated name. But I've read both of their reports. But if you had that and you said, wow, there is something, there's a there. Would you be willing to change your mind
He
about
wouldn't.
the belief?
He would never
About-
accept it
but I wanna-
because he'd be
yes or
convinced
no?
it's a lie.
But sorry, you need to clarify. Would I be able to change my mind about?
About do we have to go? Are you coming to get us out? We have to leave.
7.
I'm sorry if you had a loss.
Yes, that is why I walked out when you described.
It's around. Oh, I'm sorry.
That is why I walked out when you described brutally killing someone. That is.
Talk about some of that. Well, all right. Anyway, thank you for the conversation, and thank you for talking. Thank you for giving your
Hey, and
objections.
you know what?
I'm
And I wanted to
always
say
willing to
this.
have a conversation.
I wanted to say this. I do appreciate you talking with me, and I want to say that to you as well. I know we disagree,
Yeah.
and I do think that we both hurt each other, and I do respect both of you, and I hope some of that respect goes towards me as well.
I mean, I certainly, I think conversation is the essence of this whole thing.
Absolutely. So, and I appreciate you hearing me out.
Sure, of course.
So, and I appreciate
Well,
both of you
thanks
as
for
well.
coming on, man. Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep.